Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. Today we're taking a look at the final episodes of Avatar The Last Airbender. I'm Dan, and as always, I am joined by the late Airbender himself, who is now graduating. He's no longer the late Airbender, he's just an Airbender. It's Chris Billingham, everyone!
Thank you.
Woo. Calm down, everyone. Quiet down. Bring it down, guys. No, yeah, oh, they're still clapping. Sorry, Chris. Very good. It's great. Thanks, everyone. Are you going to come down now? We're going to bring it down? Thank you. Yes, thank you. Good.
You know what that felt like? You
What?
know when you see like, and I mean no disrespect to anyone here,
Yeah.
but you remember Netflix went through that spate of just giving anyone that was vaguely involved in a comedy a Netflix special. Like everyone, Adam Devine had one, Kevin James, like just everyone got a
I'm
special,
pretty sure I
you know,
had
for
one.
a while there. Yeah, exactly. And like you'd see these people walk on, and maybe it's a difference between American audiences and British audiences, but you'd see them walk on, and these people would be getting like a standing ovation when they walked on. And you'd be like, come on now, people, this is excessive. I felt like I'd guest starred in 3 episodes of a sitcom, got a Netflix special, and got a standing ovation when I walked on stage there in that introduction. It's very specific.
Well, you know what, Chris? It's the last episode. You know, you're no longer the late Airbender after this, are you? Because you've seen it. I mean, you will always
seen it, man.
technically have been late to the show, but you've now seen it. You're done.
It's kind of annoying, though, knowing there's a spin-off, because, as we'll talk about later, and as I hinted at, I loved the fact that we don't... I really enjoyed not knowing all the answers to Zuko's mum. But part of me goes, and actually, I think we will talk about this as well, I think there's a world where you don't have the kiss either. And then I kind of went, but maybe all those things are explored in Korra. So there's still shit I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's because it's hard for you. Yeah, because I don't want to give anything away about what Korra is and isn't. I will say they're pretty good at being respectful to this show, and they don't step on this show very much.
Yeah, my assumption is
this show influences events of Korra, but it doesn't. Korra doesn't end up becoming a sequel to Avatar, where we're answering questions from this show. I'll put it that way. I mean, you're about to say so. Your assumption is, and I've cut you
my
off.
assumption is it's set in the world, and we might get cameos from characters, but like it's not necessarily that any character is a big part of it. Maybe.
I think you're on the right lines. It's like the way this show is probably one of the best versions of what this is for its time. I think Korra is one of the best versions of what a spin-off could be of a show like this, where it's like, well, we're going to keep the world is interesting, but we'll have new stories to tell. We'll use a new structure for telling the story. You know, we've got new characters. Like it's very much like trying to be its own show, and I think it succeeds and fails in interesting ways as it goes. I know Korra is a slightly more divisive show. I think Korra's biggest crime is not being as good as one of the greatest animated shows of all time, and that is sorry guys, but I think that was probably inevitable, right? Like
that is a crime we all live by. I'm not as good as Avatar. I'm not
exactly. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, Korra has flaws, some really interesting ones, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it, because I think Korra, I think there's going to be a lot more debate about the choices of the show Korra than not, because I think it really pushes the boat a bit more than Avatar did. I think Avatar, once it set up itself, kind of played, not safe is the wrong word maybe, but I think they had a really good, clear idea of what they were doing, and they never really steered too far off the path. They kept it pretty straightforward, and they executed. They had the idea, they executed. Korra has this opportunity to try different things. It's a bit more of an experimental show in that sense, and I think varying results, which make it really interesting to talk about. So I'm very much looking forward to getting to that. We'll come back to when and how at a later time, I suppose.
I suppose then my comment is perhaps more valid for the comics.
Yes. Yeah, yes, the supplemental comics, which I don't know whether we cover those or not. I've yet to figure that out, because there's a couple of them, and there's one that really does deal with, I mean, it's called The Search. You can have a guess what that might cover.
I reckon searching for his mum.
So yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Chris, in that I don't 100% know whether we should cover those or not. I guess we should, but we'll come back to that. We'll figure that out. That's a different... and
also, I think that's a beyond Korra thing. If we do anything with it, like,
maybe, that's a point as well. But yeah, there's plenty of Avatar comics to cover if we ever do that. They're good though. Actually, I will say I actually really like the Avatar comics. As supplemental and spin-off media goes, I think the Avatar comics are some of the best. Like, so many TV shows have spin-off comics and books and all this stuff, and they're always just small cash-ins, aren't they? It's like, hire any old writer to do any old dross, stick the logo on it and hope that it sells. That's very common. Same with comics. Just, I was thinking novels particularly when I said that, but like that works for comics too. Just get any old writer and artist in, make it look like the thing, sell it.
It seems, to be fair, because I just clicked on Legend of Korra wiki to see how many seasons there were.
4, I believe, but they're shorter.
Yeah, well, it says The Last Airbender, the Nickelodeon declined the creator's pitch for an Avatar follow-up animated movie based on what would then become the 3-part comics, The Promise, The Search, and The Pit, choosing instead to expand Korra to 26 episodes. So that maybe explains why they're so good, because they were originally pitched as movies.
Right, that does make a lot of sense. Yeah, no, they are good. They're really solid. And I've not read those since they came out. So, whereas I go back to the show very frequently, it would be interesting to hit the comics up at some point. So maybe we'll do that. But anyway, this week we're sitting down to review the last 2 episodes, Into the Inferno. I know they called it The Inferno. It's called Into the Inferno, and then Avatar Aang. So, for those who don't remember, this is the one where they all have a fight. Basically, we have Iroh and the rest of the sort of Old Masters gang, the White Lotus, taking back Ba Sing Se. We have Katara and Zuko taking on an unhinged Azula. We have Sokka, Suki, and Toph trying to take out the airships, so to preserve life and the planet, because they're just scorching it. And then we have Aang, plus a little bit Momo. Just in that he's there. He vanishes for a bit, then comes back. Aang fighting the Fire Lord, which is obviously arguably your headliner if this was a concert. I think Sokka and Ko are the support act. Actually, no, there's 2 support acts, because I'd say the White Lotus is kind of a support act, and then we've got the sort of sub headliner, another band you're very much looking forward to seeing, which is Zuko and Katara versus Azula, and then of course the headliner, which is Aang and the Fire Lord. Spoiler alert: they win. The good guys win, and all is well. That's the rough story. So what do we think?
I think it's fantastic, and you know what? I thought it was great at the time, but especially on the rewatch, it's just like, this is fucking awesome. There's so much kind of kick-ass stuff in it. There's so much happening and going on. There's so many visuals that you're like, hoo boy, like Toph. Like, I know it's the one I referenced a lot last week, but Toph becoming like Earth Woman, like, is just stunning. Yeah,
like an Iron Man style,
Iron Man style thing is just absolutely incredible. It's just brilliant, isn't it? Like, it's so the visuals of like the ships crashing over the top of their ship crashing over the top of the others to make them fall. All the visuals in all the fights, like the character stuff of like Zuko diving in front of Katara. All the stuff. There's still. It's not as funny as the first 2 parts, but there's still so much comedy in it. Like I really love Sokka's. Have I told you how cool it is that you can metal band? You could stand to tell me more. Like, metal band, sorry. You could stand to tell me more. Like, so good.
I think my favourite one, I was looking through it, I was trying to figure out like how much comedy there was in this, and the one that really struck me is What did you do? I took away his bending. Wow, who taught you that? A giant lion turtle. You have the weirdest adventures when you leave. That's just such a great exchange.
Doesn't help my Deus lion turtle argument, that line, though, does it?
No, it doesn't. We'll come to that. That's in my notes. I'm curious as to how we.
It feels
how we
like
feel
even
about
the
that now.
show is. It feels like even the show is going. Yeah, but
It's a great line though. It's funny.
No, it's really funny, and that, but not. I think because I knew it was coming, I wouldn't say bothered me less. The second time watching it, but certainly distracted me less. You know, I spent a lot of that beyond that point the first time I watched it, going, huh, like, but and it is actually. To be fair, I still think everything I said about Deus Ex remains, but it is clearer, actually, when I rewatched it. Like, when I really paid attention to what the turtle was saying, it wasn't a repeat of what they said before. He specifically referenced bending energy. So
yeah, do you want to start there? Do we want to get the turtle talk out the way so we can talk about the other stuff?
Yeah, because we spent a lot of time on it last time, so let's get it out of the way.
So let's quickly recap in case somebody's coming in on this episode and didn't listen to our previous one. We had a lot of discussion in them when we reviewed the previous two episodes, whose titles currently escape me because my brain has died. Sozin's Comet Part 1 and 2. Particularly in the second part, the turtle comes in, and I think it's the Old Masters, that one. You could tell that was bothering me that I couldn't remember the title. There you go, the Old Masters. I can sleep easy now. The turtle sort of comes in, says some cryptic stuff to Aang that we couldn't pass. And then, obviously, in this episode, the reveal is that the turtle taught him how to energy bend and take away that. And we were talking about whether having a character we've literally never met before, has never been pre-established, coming in and granting a power to our hero to solve the conundrum they were in of how to stop the Fire Lord without killing him. Does that feel Deus Ex Machina or not? Because it is very close to the finale, if not part of, depending on your definition. Because for me, like, the finale really does feel like these last two episodes. The rest feels like build-up, and we'll there's some trivia on that matter as well, which we'll come to. But I do, for me, because it's a setup in an episode that feels separate to this, and it's set up in the build-up and then paid off later on, it doesn't quite, feel like, oh, here we go, I can already hit our Doctor Who reference for the week, Chris. Often talked about is the time, not Time of Angels, what's the one, the Crash of the Byzantium and the other episode, what are they called?
Time of Angels.
Oh, it is Time of Angels. Crash of the Byzantium. Okay. So
Time of Angels and the something of Stone?
Flesh and Stone?
Possibly. I'll carry on. I'll look it up because it's going to bug me.
Yeah. I thought it was called Crash of the Byzantium, but I guess not.
No, it's definitely not called that. It is
Flesh and Stone.
Flesh and Stone. Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone.
Great. Though that two-parter of Doctor Who, the first part sets up. Well, not even the first part. The beginning of the second episode sets up the gravity situation and the crack, which is like a crack in space and time, and then later on they switch off the gravity, which sends the bad guys through the crack in space and time, makes them go away. Some claim that's a Deus Ex Machina, and we talked a lot at the time about whether that was, and I was like, well, is setting it up correctly earlier in that episode? Yeah, all right, it's only 20-30 minutes of screen time before, but it's not. They're both introduced ahead of it. Does that immediately diffuse it? If the lion turtle shows up during the fight with Sozin, and the lightning bolt of that hits Aang, and he realizes what he can do, then I'd feel a lot more strongly that was the case. I think because it is done prior, and it is done when Aang is actively searching for answers as well. It's not like the answer is brought to him. The reason I think they get away with it, for me, is that having now watched the full thing, because like I said, I cheated last week. I only ended up watching those two episodes. My plan was to watch all four and then watch the two again, but I just didn't get time. But so having watched it all now, I think the fact that second episode of this 4-part story, Aang knows that's his dilemma and goes out looking for the answers and goes on a sort of vision quest that leads him to an answer, because he's an active participant in that story and it doesn't just sort of come at him out of nowhere from the heavens, I'm okay with it. Because it's set up ahead, and he's seeking out answers when he finds them.
Yeah, I still feel the same way. I will, partly because I watched it as a whole thing as well. So, like, for me, it was the same episode because I watched all four together. I will on reflection think it's fair to say that referring to it as Deus Ex Turtle is sort of a shorthand for what the problem is, and I will concede that I don't think you make a good argument for why it's not Deus Ex Machina, but I still stand by. It's weird that the solution is sort of literally put in his head in the final four, which again I watched as a whole thing. Like, I still feel the same way about it. It is clearer, I will say that after rewatching the second part, it is clearer what happens. But fundamentally, the turtle puts the solution in Aang's head in the last episode, or at least in what was presented as the last episode. So I still feel I still would have preferred it to have been embedded more throughout the series. And I still feel it's a bit like, oh, don't worry, this turtle's going to appear and give him the answer. But I think it's lazy on my part to call it Deus Ex Machina, because technically it isn't a horse riding in the last scene sort of thing.
How do you feel then about it? Because obviously you're saying essentially it's still a turtle putting the answer in his head, but do you not think there's an element of truth to the fact that Aang is seeking out that specific answer when that happens? It's not an accident. Aang goes looking for the answers. The universe responds because he's the Avatar and he's the bridge between the spirit worlds and all that jargon, but it's not like the hero has the answer given to them. The hero goes looking for the answer. I think that the other big factor and why I feel okay with it now on like reflection and having the discussion we had last week is that Aang is an active participant in acquiring the answer.
That was the case in the last episode, though, or had you just not constructed that thought?
I just hadn't constructed that thought.
Yeah,
but seeing it as a whole as well has made me think about a lot about, like, because honestly it never really struck me that way, and it was you saying it kind of made me go, huh. That's a fair, because it is a fair observation that the solution is given to him in the. But okay, let me reframe it this way. Would you say it's a Deus Ex Machina in Harry Potter? Oh, I've done it, Chris. Harry Potter. When
I've just admitted it's not Deus Ex Machina here.
Oh no, okay. Let me rephrase the question then. Would you have the same? Do you have the same issue though in Harry Potter with them in the last book going and destroying some Horcruxes? Because that Aang is in the same position as the characters in Harry Potter, in that he needs to defeat the villain. There's a task he needs to complete first because he needs to figure out how to do it without killing him. And in the Harry Potter books, they need to do the Horcruxes first before they can finish him. That they both have an obstacle to climb prior to meeting with the villain, right? And they go off on their adventure to get Horcruxes, and Aang goes off on his adventure to find some other solution to the problem. They both succeed in that. Then they go to face off with the bad guy, and the thing in question is used to conclude the conflict.
No, I don't feel the same. First of all, congratulations getting both in within getting Harry Potter and Doctor Who.
Yes, I know. I was very pleased.
Minutes.
I was very pleased. Thank
very
you.
Smoothly.
I wish I had the audience sounds still playing. So I can be like, thank you.
No, because for me, one, Horcruxes are set not even set up. Horcruxes are defined in Book 6, not Book 7. Two,
True.
We see it. We have a Horcrux in Book 1. We have a Horcrux in Book 2.
Are you pronouncing them wrong on purpose?
Huh?
Are you pronouncing Horcrux wrong on purpose?
No, that's just how I don't know. It's just how I pronounce it. I'm doing the Latin version.
Horcrux.
All of those things are that thing is embedded into all the books. That would be like saying, would I have a problem with this if there was something in series 1 that turned out to be energy bending? No, I've already made it very clear. In that scenario,
right.
I wouldn't have a problem with this at all. That's my problem. I don't feel it's embedded in until it's like, shown at the end.
So what you're really saying is that the issue doesn't really lie in the way these 4 episodes execute it. It's more that the concepts involved weren't embedded throughout the whole season.
I feel like it's, back. And that's, and again, I don't want to. I don't want to get what's the term? I don't want to get too picky on the term, but it's kind of, I think if I were to rephrase it, which I think is fair, it's like it's Deus Ex Machina on the whole show. Do you know what I mean? Not necessarily the episode or the scene, but like it just felt a bit like it's as that joke intends it, you know. Toph goes, "Who told you that? I met a turtle." You have the craziest adventures when you're on the, you know what I mean? That joke in itself, I feel like, is slightly the show going, yeah, it is a bit funny, isn't it, that a turtle just gave him the answer. You know? I would have preferred it to be embedded throughout the show, the season, whatever. As discussed last week, I have less of a problem with it when I think of it as a part 1, a part 2, and then a 2-part finale. Truly, I do. You know what I mean? And again, you know, we're nitpicking. This did not break the episode for me in any way. But I think
it just feels like the conversation. Like I felt like they had to be some sort of. Now we're talking specifically about how it's executed in the end. It needed to be brought up. The other element of that, by the way, I did want to ask is, how did you feel about the turtle saying completely different things in the flashback this week to last? Because that threw me through a loop. Because did we just not see that? Did we just cut around that last time? What the fuck? What?
Well, what I was happy because I was like, oh, it's not as confusing as I thought it was. I was pleased to be wrong on that. I was almost pleased that he didn't say something as vague. I was like, oh no, it is abundantly clear that it is. He doesn't use the term energy bending, which is clearly
but he does mention energy.
It mentions bending energy, so I was actually pleased about that. My head canon for that is, that's one of the things the turtle told him in the flash in his head. Do you know what I mean? Like, Aang took that from not what the turtle said beforehand, but what the turtle said to his spirit, his mind, as he put the idea in his head, sort of thing.
Right, because those words, presumably to disguise the reveal of being able to energy bend, essentially, they've clearly sort of...
Why disguise it? Why not just have it be those words and have the audience think, what does that... I still think there's a bit of, what does that mean? What... You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'd have put that dialogue in the episode. If you're going to air it as 4, if you're going to do a 4-part finale, I'd have put that dialogue in the Old Masters, whatever episode it was, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. So looking at it, I've just pulled them up just so I can compare. And yeah, we have the Lion Turtle says, the true mind can weather all the lies and illusions without being lost. The true heart can suffer the poison of hatred without being harmed. Since beginningless time, darkness thrives in the void, but always yields to purifying light. That's what the turtle says in Sozin's Comet to the Old Masters. But in part 4, when we have a flash to the conversation, he says, in the era before the Avatar, we bent not the elements, but the energy within ourselves. To bend another's energy, your own spirit must be unbendable, or you will be corrupted and destroyed. So, and it's described here in the it's described here. This is great in the transcript, is in quote marks, Aang remembering. So, did we just not see that? Did they just cut around it? Or is it, I don't know. I'm not sure how I felt about just that in general, just from a practical perspective. Like, even forgetting the implications of, like, did the Lion Turtle speak to into his heart and mind, and therefore we only got a bit. But, like, just practically speaking, I can't get my head around that we didn't witness it the first time. And also then there's the even wider view of it when you pull out even further and go, why did the writers not include it? You're right. Would that have given... But it away?
Yeah, and I think that it might have given it away. But if you're doing a movie finale, fine. Like, because I think the very notion of having the audience having 15-20 minutes where I chew on it and go, what does that mean? Immediately makes it feel less like the answer is just given. Because then, you know,
you're right, because it's actually this all aired as one as well. So there's really no. Like, it's not like there was a week between this episode airing and the next where everyone could go online and speculate and, like, figure it out.
Yeah, I'd still feel it a little bit, and I think the fact that the fact that they had to change the dialogue and the fact that they make a joke of it feels like it's not unfair to say it's at the very least a bit clunky. But I feel like if that dialogue was in part 2, you're then watching for 20 minutes going, fucking, is he going to energy bend? Like, okay, it suddenly is a bit more palatable because it's not like that moment where it's like, oh, okay, the turtle was talking about energy bending and now here Aang is energy bending. Like,
yeah, and that's the thing is Aang is being flippant about it when he talks to Toph. But like looking at this dialogue, he's what's frustrating about this is it's not even that like Aang needs to necessarily be taught it. It's more about you can try it, but it's going to be about whether you're pure of heart. It's going to be about your mental state when you face the Fire Lord, and that's what's frustrating. Is like they've tried to have their cake and eat it too, in that they want us to be surprised at what Aang has done, and be like, oh, of course, take his bending away, right? But they also want us to see this battle of souls, right? And I just think I would sacrifice quite happily the surprise of energy bending to make the battle of souls thing clearer when it's happening. Because when you rewatch this, when you've not watched, when it's not the first time you're seeing this, the moment when you see the two lights connect, the red and the blue, and the red starts to grow and nearly engulfs the good in Aang, and then Aang overcomes it. That's glorious when you know what the fuck is happening.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying you don't like a person watching it the first time would be lost in that moment. It's obviously that struggle of good versus evil. It's a very clear visual thing, but I think it has a lot more impact if you know what's going on for sure. And I think it's a real shame that their attempt to disguise the secret of how Aang was going to solve this problem instead of just like actually just telling us, or even because I don't even think what the line title says is give it away for sure. We bend not the elements but the energy within ourselves. That doesn't say you're going to take his bending away.
No, not at all. No. I think it would have been much better with that, because also it's a surprise. The need for a surprise is kind of their own making. It's a good question, and it's an interesting question. How's Aang going to defeat the Fire Lord without killing him? But I don't think it's a question I'd have had particularly just watching it. I'm probably doing a podcast and discussing each episode for an hour.
Sure.
Yeah, but like in general, you've planted that question in the audience's minds a couple of episodes ago specifically. So It's sort of like I just don't think it even particularly needs to be a surprise, because also it's kind of like it's clearly this big epic and dangerous thing, and I got a question on the moment which we'll come back to. But part of me's going, does Aang, like, Aang gets back and they tell the story, and Zuko and Katara are like, really? You can do that? And then their heads turn and the camera rips around and Azula's just there chained up. Because it's like, do you know what I mean? Azula's clearly arrested as well, but, the former Fire Lord, he's in jail, but even if he wasn't banished to that sort of remote jail, he wouldn't have been much of a threat anymore. Like, and I don't think they did, bend Azula's power out of her as well. But like, it's interesting, that notion.
Yeah, it's a thought, isn't it? Because it's a strong power to it is a bit. You could argue it's a bit game breaking to introduce the concept even into the show. Because it's handled. I think because you could argue, God, you can't really do anything set after this. We now live in a world where the Avatar could just go, well, you don't get to bend anymore. And so what villain is threatening in what way? That's a pretty game-breaking power to give to anyone.
Unless you, which links into actually a big kind of a discussion I want to have.
Sure.
So maybe, do you have any more on the turtle stuff?
No, look, I think it was important we talked about it, and it was a very interesting discussion, but I'm sick to fucking death of the turtle. I want to put the turtle in a box. I want to put that box in a safe. I want to kick that safe off a boat, let it sink to the bottom of the ocean, and then leave the planet.
I mean, it's not the turtle's fault. We're not against the turtle. It's just the concept. So,
I know, and that's the thing is, because I phrased it, I want to put the turtle in a box, in a safe. I'm thinking, how fucking big is this box and this safe? Because that turtle was fucking massive.
So
I want to shrink the
linking to
turtle
that, 'cause-
down like a Pokemon. I want to throw a Pokeball at him, capture him in the Pokeball, then put the Pokeball in a box that's in a safe that I push off a boat that sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and then I leave the planet. That's what I want to happen.
So the turtle's safe.
Turtle's perfectly safe.
Yeah.
If
good.
if
I
the
know,
if the Pokemon Company are to be believed, they love being in those Pokeballs, Chris. It's not captivity. It's not. It's definitely not captivity.
I'm going to be very clear.
It's not
I've got
dogfighting
nothing
either.
against I've got nothing against the turtle itself. But so what you've just said. But moving us on.
Yes.
Because the answer to what you've just said is, well, that's why, and I assume they've done this. You do more stories in the world set in the future with an avatar that's not learnt that skill yet. But that links to a really overall question I have for this sort of for the show as a whole and the finale. And before anyone shouts at me, this isn't one of those things where I've had this thought, because I had this thought watching it, and I've made up my own personal mind. I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm not nitpicking or doing anything like that, but I think it's a worthy discussion. The show states numerous times that Aang has not mastered all the elements that much now. The show also makes it very clear that he gets the upper hand in that battle when he goes into the Avatar state, suggesting that he has that power from the past lives as well. Mm-hmm. Now, my own personal fan explanation in my head canon is he's mastered them enough that with his own mastery and their influence of the past lives, he can do what he does in the finale.
Sure.
And it's a combination of both. It wouldn't work without the other.
Correct.
But do you think someone... That is actually how I feel. That's my interpretation of that moment. But do you think someone could levy the criticism... Well, if he hasn't had to master all the elements, what's been the point of all that time we've spent on that? Because he's just defeated him with using the power from his past lives.
Well, I think thankfully the answer is your answer is correct, but it's also embedded into the show, like factually. It's not just theory. I mean, Aang goes into the Avatar state a handful of times over the course of the series, and each time he can do more stuff, and it's usually linked to. So the first time he goes into the Avatar state in the whole show, right up top when he sees the air temple that's been trashed, the southern air temple, he gets all windy and floats up because air bending is the only bending he knows. The second time that I can think of off the top of my head that he goes into the Avatar state is at the end of season 1. And he uses water bending, which he's now learnt, to make himself a big water monster. I think he can tap into the knowledge and skills of a previous avatar, and use, decades of training to his advantage in moments of extreme need. But he does have to have the base skill. He can't just, he couldn't have, if when he was a baby, if he had his life threatened, he wouldn't have glowed eyes, bent all the elements, and blown someone away. Not without having learnt them himself first. And that's not to say there couldn't be an avatar that learns them all very young, or masters them all very quickly, and can do things earlier, or even, presumably, an avatar that learns them later in life. Aang was an unusual avatar based on how they usually run it, right? Normally, you don't travel the world until you're a certain age, and you do it slowly, and then you're an avatar by a certain age, right? Aang had a very unusual version of this training that he had to do it much younger than most. But arguably, circumstances could lead to another avatar being discovered late, maybe, and finding their powers in their 20s and having to struggle with that. That's also a thing that could happen. So, that does theoretically mean that you could have like a very young avatar that can tap into that stuff also if they get there earlier. But that doesn't necessarily but it all matches with the facts of what we've seen in the show. He doesn't, in the avatar state prior to this season, we never saw him bend fire.
Yeah.
But this avatar state, when he goes into avatar state this time, man, he's like firebending master. He's throwing fire everywhere. And the irony there is, of course, Roku is the last element. Is the last master he had, the last avatar that we had, the one that he's had the most interaction with, the one you would argue he is tapped into the most. And he still didn't bend fire until this season as a in the Avatar state. So while I do see the criticism that it feels like he's getting the powers, pulling the powers from his spiritual side and not from his own level of skill, I would argue it has to be, and is demonstrated to be, quite a bit of both. And I think that's why...
I agree.
I don't think it's a criticism I've heard before, but I would not be surprised to hear several people feel that way. For sure.
It was a like I say, as set up, my thoughts are your thoughts, but the thought came to me. One other thing, just about the moment where... because I think this would have been too cheesy, but I think there's probably, you could do a fan edit, or there might even be a fan edit of it out there. Do you think it would have just been too much if that amazing scene where the fire overtakes Aang when he is energy bending, and it gets to just his eye, and then and it goes all blue? What do you think if we'd have had a little flash to Toph, to Sokka, to his friends, and to kind of an end on Katara, and the notion that thanks to his friendship and love with them, his spirit is pure and is able to take over?
I think I would have been fine with that. You're right, it's slightly cheesy. I don't think I would have said that was my favourite moment in the show, but I would have been totally fine with that. I think that would have it maybe even made it better. I think...
Because I just think it would have added I don't think I'd have done it, but I think it would have added a notion of why he's strong. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I almost want to... almost the way he does it, they do it, you could go, well, I don't understand how the Fire Dude even got that close to taking over. You kind of have, let's see what fights back, and it's that spirit and stuff. So, yeah, it was just something. But I think the problem with it, and the reason I think I'd go, no, is, you could point to a million variations. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're down weak, and then they think of this person, and they get up, and stuff like that. It's unfortunately a little bit of a trope, but in my head canon, again, I think that's what I like to think is happening in his head.
Yeah, well, see, this is you're bringing up an interesting point as well, because it kind of links back to the thing you were saying about the Avatar state. Because one of the notes I did write was I was not 100% sure I liked that he got into the Avatar state when the mark on his back was struck. The reason being. So the whole threat was that he'd lost his ability to go into the Avatar state when he was struck by lightning, But also, he'd lost his ability to go into the Avatar state because he'd abandoned his chakra training with Guru Patik. I don't know if you recall. Chakras,
vaguely.
All that stuff. So he did a Luke Skywalker. He was halfway through his training, and he abandoned it to go save his friends in Ba Sing Se. And Guru Patik basically said, if you leave now, you'll never be able to tap into the Avatar state. Then he was like, no, don't care. My friends are important. And he off on his adventure he went. And he hasn't gone into the Avatar state since. So for me, there was an element of, the coincidence that needs to happen for him to be struck by a rock in that very specific spot, number one, that feels a bit like just luck. And that's not great. But I do also understand that the intention, I think, is that the Fire Lord brings about his own destruction by toying with Aang in the way he does, where he could have defeated Aang probably sooner because he's clearly a lot stronger especially when it comes to firebending, and that's the thing that's strongest at the moment. Aang is very much on the back foot when that moment occurs, right? Aang is like crouched in a ball of rock, just praying not to be murdered any moment, right? So I think the notion that the writers were going for is like, Aang gave the Fire Lord the chance to get out of this situation. He said, you can end this now, you don't have to fight me. Knowing full well that if he fights him, it's going to bring on, through some means or another, his destruction. And him pushing Aang back into that rock, turning on the Avatar state, is literally him starting the path to his own destruction. I get that. I kind of see it. It's not explicit in the show, so I could argue even that's not clear enough to be a thing. Would it not, Chris? Here's a suggestion. You tell me if you think this would have been better. If inside the ball of fire, Aang remembered the words of Guru Patik and remembered the things he has to let go to unblock his chakras. And he thinks back and he gets stuck on the same one he got stuck on last time, which is Katara. and he thinks the world is more important. I do still love her, but I'm going to have to let her go. Just mentally. And he does. And he taps into his avatar state. And then he does it. Because in that version of it, he's bringing on the avatar state. Aang has agency. In the version that happens in the actual finished show, he gets a very lucky strike on the back that really flukily reenacts those powers. And had that not happened, basically he was going to be turned into a crispy duck. He was just going to be a sort of coal-like substance on the ground. He was going to be fried. So I don't know. Am I wrong? Am I right? I don't know. It's one thing I noted. I found very interesting in this, in rewatching it with a more critical eye.
I think there's that would be a lot to get across, the letting go stuff. I like the idea if you then combine it with the notion we were just talking about. Like, I like the notion of, in order to get the avatar state, he lets go of his friends, but then actually, in order for his energy to be pure and override Ozo's, whatever, Fire Lords, Ozai.
Sorry, the Phoenix King.
The Phoenix King, yes, that's the problem. The Phoenix King. It's them that bring that back and make that possible.
Right,
so it's this notion of...
Because doesn't that then sort of imply you need a balance? You do need to be able to detach.
Yeah, exactly.
But you do also... But having friends is also a strength. Yeah, you're right. Oh, man, we should, we should have been writing this show, mate. That's way better.
I think, well, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it would have never got to a finale. It would have been cancelled within multiple episodes, but still.
Because everything prior to that would have been shit and we'd have been bad at writing it. Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, I think if you do, I do
think I prefer that as an idea, because I think that implies, listeners, comments down below. How would you feel about that? I imagine, because I imagine it'll be mixed, but yeah,
I agree with you. The notion of the back hit is a bit like, I don't like being able to point at something and go, well, that was good. Coincidence, wasn't it? And I think you can do that with the way it's currently done, certainly. And again, you can headcanon it, that didn't actually. It's not like it pressed a button. It's that it just, in that moment, it was the moment it rose up from inside Aang or something like that. You know what I mean? You can headcanon your way out of it.
You can, Chris. And if listeners would like to see some examples, feel free to peruse the comments under this very video.
Yeah, I'm sure they're there.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
I have another discussion question, but it is moving us away from that scene. If you want,
yeah, sure, yeah. I ranted enough about the.
I'm saying it, man. I'm saying it. I'm a big love of love. I don't think you need the kiss. I think you can end on the hug. Yeah,
I agree. So for those who don't remember, the end of the episode, everyone's having a good old time. Zuko is Fire Lord. Everyone's living life, living large, and Sokka's being bad at art again. And we have that great joke from Iroh where he goes, "Hey, my belly's not that big anymore. I really trimmed down," which is a great line. And then Aang just sort of is watching it all peacefully and happily. He goes out onto a balcony and he's looking out over all of the piece he's created. Admittedly, there's tanks stacked on top of each other and kids are throwing rocks at them. And there's aftermath, but still, he's succeeded. And Katara comes out and they share a moment and they share a hug. And for a moment, you think that's perfect and enough. And then they kiss. And I'm always torn on it, because if it had just been a hug, with the possibilities of it becoming more, and camera up to the sky, the end, I think that would have been more than enough. I don't really need the kiss. I don't mind the kiss as such, but I'm always slightly conflicted on it because it doesn't feel necessary.
Do you think it's partly because they did the ambiguity with Zuko's mother? So they kind of felt, we can't have that be a bit ambiguous and be this story continues beat, and then do a they hug, the story continues beat with those two as well. Do you think they kind of went, we need to definitively state one way or the other on one of these things?
I think if they wanted to get away with that, they need to change Ember Island players. Because the thing with Ember Island players is that it sort of sets up this situation where Katara is kind of like, you know, I'm not ready necessarily for a relationship.
I can't say one way or the other while a war's going on. Basically,
right. So if you cull that from it, then they can just kiss unambiguously at the end, and it's like it's understood straight away that's, you know, there would be no need for ambiguity. The reason I like the ambiguity and crave it is because they established it in that Ember Island player sequence, because Katara sort of makes it clear that then she's not ready for that yet, and the minute the war ends isn't going to be the moment for them to figure it out either. 2 seconds later. So like the hug is enough for me to go, they're going to explore it in a world where we've had them have that conversation, the Ember Island players. But if you want to get away with just them kissing and you want that to feel final and like a victory, without me questioning whether it is better ambiguous, you maybe need to adjust the scene in Ember Island players. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't know if
yeah. No, I know what you're saying. You don't need to answer a question if you haven't asked it.
Right. Yeah. By raising the possibility of an ambiguous end for them, because in fact I remember it well because we reviewed that episode, and you, Chris, even said this makes me want them to have. You said in the review for Ember Island players, I wanted them to get together, but now I'm not sure. Now I think I'll be just happy with. You might have even just said with a hug. You know, I don't know if you said those exact words, but I'm sure you said something similar. So that must have been very conflicting for you as well, then, because obviously it's the hug followed by the kiss.
Yeah, I just think, and you know, the it's a lovely moment. The music swells, but even the way it's cut, it kind of feels like it's panning out. The music's kind of ending, and then we get back and we cut back and they kiss and the music swells again, and it's a wonderful moment. It's a lovely beat to end it on. But I just think the hug would have made me go, oh, they'll probably end up together, and they're not quite confirming it, and that's cool. But even I will admit, I'm already going, oh, the mum might be alive and they're not going to confirm it, and that's cool. So two things that don't really get answered. And again, I agree with you. In that case, what we're actually saying is don't ask the question, not necessarily even. We're not saying don't answer it. We're saying don't ask it, because then you won't have to answer it. I think is where we've landed on that. Mm-hmm. But because I do love. I don't know why so much, but I just love the note of. And it doesn't even feel like it's setting up for anything, and maybe it was if they were sort of toying with the movies that then became comic, or a movie that then became the comic, who knows. But just like, I don't know why I loved so much that we don't get an answer, a firm answer to where his mum is, or even actually confirmation that she is definitely alive. I guess I love the notion of more adventures to follow, maybe. You know?
So let's talk about that then, because that is, I think that is it is a sticking point for a lot of fans. I think a lot of people felt frustrated by that choice. Obviously, I didn't take a poll, but my interactions with the fan community in the past, I've seen comments on both sides of the Zuko sort of situation. Some feeling ripped off by the ending. I've seen a lot of memes where it's the shot of Zuko saying, "Where is my mother?" Then it's the shot that says "the end." And then they use the clip from earlier in the season when Zuko was reading the scroll. It was the tale of the Fire Lord and the Avatar. And he gets to the end, he's like, "That's it? Where's the rest of it?" And they clip those together. So there are definitely people who feel like that should have had conclusion. So since you've landed on the side of not really being bothered, in fact, actually not even being neutral on the subject, but actually quite enjoying that, do you want to sort of maybe elaborate on like how you got there and why it didn't really bother you? And can you kind of see where the criticism might come from?
Oh, I can see where the criticism comes from. Absolutely. I think, like I say, the best I've got is it implies more adventures. Because one thing, like, I feel slightly like the minute you have Suki dressed up again as a Koshi warrior, I was a little bit like, Oh, like I just the practicalities of it just make me go. Are they going to be the big romantic story that I want them to be? Sokka and her, because she's got commitments. Do you know what I mean? She is a warrior. So even having her in that last scene made me go, I don't know if that rings true that much to me. Like, I feel like she'd be off with her family. She'd be reuniting with them. The notion that I feel like Toph would be, I feel like Aang and Zuko would be rebuilding the world, and Zuko would be, trying to address things and undo what the Fire Nation have done. I feel like Toph would be reuniting with her parents. I feel like Sokka and Katara would be wanting to spend time with their dad or go and visit their nan and go back to their tribe. Like, the notion, as much as it pains me to say it, that scene where they're all relaxing together in the new world and having fun, maybe, and also, the tanks are still there, so maybe the notion is it's the immediate aftermath, right, and they're just taking a beat to relax, and that's what it is. I think I like the mum thing because it almost, in my head, I get to go, they go do that together because it's such a big thing that why wouldn't they do that together? And the gang are adventuring beyond this point, and I quite like that idea. I think it's also like it's quite a triumphant moment for Zuko to just be like, this is the power I have now, and I want to know this, and you're going to tell me. I don't think we've got time to then... the only other way... If I don't think we've got time for a full-on scene with her. I think maybe you have a carriage pull up and Zuko looks up as a figure gets out of the thing or something. But it's kind of... And also... I think what's also influencing it, and no one's got this... I admit fully this shouldn't influence it, but, you can't control what you've seen recently and what influences it. I've recently rewatched The Dark Knight Rises, and then I listened to our review of The Dark Knight Rises, and I still stand by that end scene would be better if Michael Caine looks up and smiles. And I think, for me, feeling that way about that and watching it recently, within a day or two of seeing this, that scene for me is the equivalent of Michael Caine looking up and smiling. And that's very specific and very personal and not a good answer to your question, because I absolutely can see the criticisms. I absolutely understand it. But for me, that moment represents his power, represents the story continuing, which is what I want it to do. I want to know that they don't go their separate ways. I want the excuse for these people that don't really have a lot of excuses to actually be together anymore. I want there to be an excuse for them to be together. And I want Michael Caine looking up and smiling, and it being up to the audience. So it's very personal, I think, why that doesn't bother me. But where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I think I agree, because obviously, we talk about this a lot. You're always sort of thinking more about sort of like story and stuff, and like I'm always about it's the character stuff that really is like where I'm at. And for me, Zuko's arc doesn't need. Zuko's arc is concluded with Azula, and his choice generally to join the Avatar and help. Zuko's arc. He sort of finishes this season, and the reuniting with his uncle was a real cherry on top for me. The mother stuff is a plot thing that is helped drive his character in previous seasons, helped inform his character. But a conclusion to that for me is that he's going to continue looking for her. I don't need more information about physically where she is personally, because you can pretty much put together that she was either banished. Well, in this show, she couldn't have been. She probably wasn't murdered because it's this show, and they really weren't a fan of that, were they? Very few people died in this show, and I'm not saying more people should have done. It's not a criticism, just an observation. I'm not casting comment on that. I'm just observing it. So the reality is,
hashtag justice for Jet.
What's that, sorry?
I said hashtag justice for Jet.
Yeah, hashtag justice for Jet. So for me, the question isn't, is she alive or not? Presumably she's alive. Presumably she was banished. She was banished to save Zuko. because obviously there was that there was a whole thing where the existing Fire Lord was not happy. It was a whole thing. And we all saw that episode. My point is, the conclusion of that episode implied to some degree that she was just simply banished, and it's not really a question of if she's alive, but where, right? So Zuko going and asking the question tells me all I need to know, is that he's still got her on his mind, and he will continue to go look for her. So his arc is complete, but he's still got some business to finish. And that's fine.
This isn't embedded into the text, but it's because obviously an element of the mum story is that the Azula interactions with the mirror.
Well, yeah, she was my next point. To talk about the fall of Azula and discuss her sort of descent into madness, because we haven't tackled that at all yet, and it does lead into obviously the final Agnikai, so we should talk about that for sure. Because
I'll be honest with you, more of a never mind where's the mum. The question I'm more interested in is what did they do with Azula? You almost expect Azula to be in a cell next to her father, but maybe not so close they can speak to each other. And you do kind of...
that would probably be a mistake, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, that's very true. I do like the notion of being able to piece together in your fan mind other stories. So you go, right, well, Azula, she's clearly... she knew what her mother would say to her, even though her mother wasn't there, and what her mother would say to her, but it's actually her saying it to herself, upset her enough to smash the thing. At the end, she breaks down in tears. If Zuko gets their mum back, is that going to be able to is there a world where Azula can be turned? And again, I just don't think you've got those story potentials in your head if you get a definitive answer on it. And actually, but then again, I suppose actually that then lessens same with a definitive answer of what happened to Azula. But I think in a way, for me personally, more of a question than where is their mum is where does Azula end up? Most people get a postscript in this show, except Azula, who the last moment we see her is when she's literally just been defeated. She doesn't. She doesn't have a part in the 19 years later monologue.
Yeah,
reference. I'm aware it's not 19 years later.
So I have a few questions on Azula that I'm curious to get your thoughts on, because I really like what they do with Azula in this show. In this particularly these last episodes, I have seen some criticism in the past that it's a bit quick because she's so together and calculating and in control the rest of the season. Seeing her go over the edge, some have argued, is sudden, seemingly, and maybe not necessarily like properly embedded into her previous behaviors. I'm not so sure that's true, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on it first. How do you feel about the Azula sort of banishing everyone and showing the cracks and chopping off her hair so she looks like a mad person, and then really going over the edge?
For me, they get away with it with one line of dialogue, which is I don't think this is the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, they're going to portray me like Ty Lee and May did. And that, for me, allows you to get away with what they do with her, because I love what they do. I'm with you. I love what they do with her in this episode. I think it's brilliant. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think essentially what that line is saying is we've seen from like the beach and stuff. She's quite fragile in terms of she's not confident in every area, and she can easily turn and be very emotional. She's clearly got mental health. There's issues. Is issues the right word? I don't know. But there's elements about her mental health that she needs to explore.
Yeah. She's definitely struggling with certain things. That's for sure.
Yeah, and they've set that up, and her friends that she always had portraying her, and her friends turning on her, her brother turning on her, all of these things have just culminated here at the exact point. I mean, for me, it makes such sense. So all of these things, her friends betraying her, the fact that she doesn't have the highest doesn't have the highest self-esteem, the fact that, her brother's disappeared, all of these things bubble to the surface at the exact moment she gets at the exact time she gets handed the throne and the power. Yes. What then follows is incredibly logical. And you just go, well, yeah, that makes sense, because of course that would happen. Like, of course it would make her power mad. Of course she would lash out at people and abuse that power. Of course she would feel isolated. And, I think personally it makes complete sense. And I think the pieces of that puzzle, the pieces of that story are embedded throughout the season and the show as well. So yeah, I understand the criticism, but for me, they nail it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they don't necessarily establish like mental health struggles as such, like directly in her behavior, but they do introduce us to all of the things that might trigger things like that for someone. Does that make sense? So it's like, you could be working or know someone in your life that's struggling with mental health issues you don't know about. You might know what the stressors are, the triggers. You might know that their life is, they're struggling with elements of their life in certain ways. But unless you have that conversation with them, you're not going to know what their mental state is. And, Azula is being... but is proven as a character to not be very open about how she's feeling. She's very much guarded, isolated, keeps all the cards to her chest because she's a very manipulative character that wants to be able to do that. So it makes perfect sense to me that the only thing we'd be able to see on the surface as viewers are what the stressors are. So we know she's haunted by the idea of her mother, and outwardly she thinks her mother feared her and hated her, but actually what she's most scared of is that her mother loved her, and that she betrayed her mother because she thought she was happy to let her mother be banished because she thought her mother hated her, but actually that's the thing she's most scared of, is the idea her mother loved her, and that's even worse because then that means she participated in the events that led to her banishment. We know that recently she was betrayed by her friends, the people she thought wouldn't turn their back on her, whether she ruled them via fear or friendship or not, she's now questioning her own. I mean, she says it, trust is for fools, fear is the only way. And is that because she did trust May and Ty Lee, and they broke that trust, and that she had at points controlled them with fear, but that hadn't worked in the long run? I mean, what's the last thing May says to her on camera that we got from the end of that Boiling Rock episode? May says, I love him more than I fear you. And that's, I think, the moment Azula realizes those friendships are actually maybe not friendships at all, but actually she always controlled everyone through fear. You can see all the things that would bring someone to feel that way, even if they've not directly shown outward signs of mental health struggles, and seeing her sort of the cracks starting to show in this episode, as Chris pointed out, when the final stressor is introduced, which is power, a thing that would make, and has made throughout history, many people become extremely paranoid. When you combine it with all of that, I think it kind of makes sense.
It's exactly that, isn't it? For me, you just go, yeah, no, that tracks.
yeah, it does. And it's and what's great about this episode is, what's great about these two episodes is that whole spiel that both myself and Chris just gave about all the different factors that could be contributing to someone, in this case Azula's mental health. They're all discussed in this episode. How did they find time for that, Chris? So much happens in these two episodes, and yet they still found time to do scenes that managed to give us all of that interesting character stuff. It's why Azula's probably the best villain of the show. Philo Ozai is great because they do a really good job of keeping him mysterious and imposing the whole way through the show. I think he is one of the most imposing villains for someone with so little screen time ever. The way they talk about him, the way they set him up, he just seems like this insurmountable hurdle throughout a lot of the show. And I think that's really clever that they did that. From a character perspective, though, he's a bit bland, one note, because he's not really supposed to be the complex villain. He's just supposed to be, the sort of, the curator of their woes. He's the guy behind the things that are happening that are bad. Azula gets to be the show's best villain because she's the most compelling character. And
I love that notion. Speaking of, I agree with everything you just said. I love and it really caught me on this viewing when Zuko says to, what's his name?
Ozai?
Pronounce it right. Ozai. When Zuko says to Ozai, "You banishing me was the best thing you ever did because it set me on the right path." Yes. The notion that if he hadn't have banished him, they probably would have, like, that notion of, without having to turn to him and say, because I turned against you is why the Avatar won, which is the case. You know, he learnt firebending through Zuko, their friendship, da-da-da-da-da. That notion of, actually, you fucked up when you banished your son is fucking brilliant.
Yes,
like, I loved that. I was like, oh yeah, that's true. Like, this is fucking crazy.
Because if he doesn't banish Zuko doesn't push Aang in the first few seasons when he's sort of like the driving force for Aang to get to places quickly and like drive Aang into things. But then also he doesn't end up teaching Aang firebending, which Aang very clearly uses in these final. Without firebending, Aang would have been in real trouble here because at the end of the day, like, the comet was there. Firebending was the strongest element, and it's the one he clearly uses the most in the fight with Ozai for that exact reason. You know, and if Aang doesn't have that power, then the Fire Lord wins, right? I don't see how else he
crazy.
It's great.
No,
it is great because that's like the ultimate
lotion.
version of he brought about his own destruction. You know, there's a mini version of it earlier in the episode with the whole, we talked about it already, the, you know, knocking Aang back into that rock and setting off the Avatar state or whatever. But the Zuko one is way more powerful and way more valid, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's great stuff.
I mean, we can talk about some of the individual moments because there's so many. Can we talk a little bit about I can't believe the captain remembered it's my birthday. One of my favourite things that's ever happened in anything ever. I love it. For those who don't remember, Sokka has an amazing plan where he they get into the sort of cockpit, the sort of flight deck of this big balloon, but the rest of the ship is still full of Fire Nation soldiers, and they want them to get out safely before they essentially crash it, because they're not monsters. They're the good guys. So Sokka's like, I've got a plan, and he's like, fly the ship low, and then he gets on the radio, pretends to be the captain, and tells all the guys that they're celebrating a special birthday today, and everyone should get to the ground level where there's going to be cake. And they all get down there, and there's two guys having an awkward conversation. One guy's like, I'm in the engine room. I'm in the I guess that's why we've never seen each other. Which, by the way, that's Brian and Mike who made the show. That's the two creators having that awkward conversation. I thought that was very nice.
Oh, that's lovely. That's great stuff.
Yeah, that's good. And then another guy is just like, another guy's just like, I can't believe the captain remembered my birthday. And at that point, Sokka opens the floor, and they just all plummet through it into the water. It's so good. It's so goddamn good. I just wanted to give that moment a shout out because it's genuinely one of my favorite things that happens in any of this.
There's and I don't know how I feel about some of it, like, but there's a lot of Toph blind humor in this as well. Her at the end being like, Toph, isn't there? Her in the end being like, I think you all look great, and then when Sokka's like, okay, you fly the plane, she's like, great idea to let the blind one fly the plane. He's like, I was talking to Suki. Like, so good.
Yeah, well, I guess we can hit on that now while we're here. There's actually a little bit of trivia about that. So the trivia I found regarding that was, where is it? Let me find the actual piece so I can read directly from it. I don't want to. It's here somewhere. Oh dear. That's typical that I've now lost that. Oh, it's because I'm looking in the wrong section, because I was looking at the second episode, not the first. Okay, so it says here in the trivia, although Sokka tells Toph that he was addressing Suki when he asked her to take control of the airship, he was in fact talking to Toph, and his statements were a cover attempt to mask that he'd forgotten that Toph was blind once again. So I was like, I wonder what the source for that is, because they don't make it too overt. It could have been that he was talking to Suki and Toph misunderstood, or it could be that he did ask Toph.
Interpret it either. You can interpret it either way, most definitely.
So I was like, what's the source for this? So I'd look into it, and apparently there's a novelization, because, you know, it's with these trivia, if there's whatever one I come across, I'm like, I don't know if this is true, I'll do a little bit of a dig. So apparently the source for this is a novelization of these final 4 episodes called Sozin's Comet, The Final Battle. And remember earlier when I told you there's just like, there's just, you know, sometimes they just cash in with these things, just like they'll hire a writer, often a very talented one, I'm sure, to just bang out, like they'll throw the script at them and say, yeah, do a novelization of this. And they'll, you know, so there's people who do make a living just doing that, to be honest. And yeah, there's a novelization of these 4 episodes called Sozin's Comet, The Final Battle. And in that, it's explicitly made clear that Sokka very much did momentarily forget that Toph was blind and asked her, and then covered it up with I was talking to Suki, but it was a cover-up rather than thingy. So I just thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. I think because I definitely was like, was he in the? I almost wish they'd made more of that in the. That could have been a funny moment, like him forgetting again. Like,
yeah, so there are a lot of Toph jokes in this. There are a lot of Toph blind jokes in this. There's a lot of Toph blind jokes in the whole show, but yeah, particularly these last 2 episodes seem to lead into it. What did you think in general then about putting? Because I found it interesting that we haven't really talked about the Sokka, Suki, Toph stuff. As a sort of like side story, like you thought that was a good way to use those characters? Because I kind of was like, I think it's interesting they chose to put Toph in the air, where she's basically at a disadvantage. Because you kind of have to nerf Toph, because, as we've discussed in the past, in many ways, Toph is so overpowered that, like, the reality is you put her in any other situation and she's just gonna, like, blast through everything and everyone, right? She can move mountains and drop them on armies. You know, she's too powerful for her own good. They've used it to their advantage once or twice. You know, like when they go into the Earth Kingdom to try and meet the Earth King, and they just blast through all of his entire army, and it's mostly just Toph doing the work. You know, so what do you think about that whole side of the final battle?
Sorry, I'm just so I've got to ask you something which isn't answering your question, but I can't, now that I've seen it, I can't not ask this question. So, the latest Nothing But Static, is there something in the episode? Or did you mean to add a title? Because it's called something episode title. Yes. Is that a reference to something that's said that I can't remember?
No,
or is that a placeholder
I could not be asked.
I'm sorry that I've sidetracked the conversation, but I just saw it and it was like, what?
Yeah, sorry. It was a bit of a strange one. I was doing it quite late last night because I'd forgotten to put it up, and I could normally I'll listen through the episode and find a title, or if Chris suggests one, I'll use that. But I literally, it was like 1 a.m. and I just could not give a fuck, so I just called it something episode title and put it up.
There's even a theme to the. I'd get that the episode before where we talked about a few different. It's an episode for it's 247 as just discussed. Something episode title.
245. Sorry.
We review. 245. We review 5 broadcast sitcoms. So it could have even been called Dad and Chris Review Broadcast Sitcoms.
It could have been Chris.
That is astonishing.
There is many things it could have been called.
That is absolutely fantastic. And I love that the explanation is not in the episode either. Like, the explanation is here weeks later on Analysing Avatar. Sorry.
I'm a complicated man, Chris.
Something episode title.
I'd forgotten I'd done that, to be honest with you, Chris. That's the worst part. When you said it, I went, oh yeah, I did do that.
That is amazing. Right, anyway, I think the way... Sorry, I can't stop laughing. I think the way... It's just the way you admitted it. It's just the way you were like... You could have been like, oh, no, it was a placeholder. Shit, sorry. But just the way you're like, yeah, no, I put it as a placeholder, and then I thought, yep.
I don't know. It wasn't even that, dude. I went to write the title. I did it knowing I was going to make that the title. I didn't. So I'm rendering the file, and it wants a name. You have to fill it in for the ID 3 tags or whatever. And so that's the moment I have to choose. And I can either click cancel and get out of that menu, and then listen to some of it to figure out a title that fits, or I can just make one up there and then. And I went with something episode title, and I hit save, and then it did it.
Well, that is astonishing. Anyway, right. I thought the way they divided them up was brilliant. I thought Toph having to use metal, I can't get over it.
I know, I'd forgotten I'd done it until you said it that moment. It was such an in-the-moment thing, I didn't even think about it. That's quite funny that you've remembered.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry it distracted me so much. As you were talking, I had a moment's flash of like... I basically went, oh, we don't need to record Nothing But Static this week, do we? It's next week. And then I thought, I'll just double check because the episode should have gone up yesterday or today, and I'll be right. It'll be the week after next. And then I just saw that the episode was called something episode title. It really distracted me. Anyway, I think the decisions they made were brilliant. I think having Katara and Zuko together was fantastic and does still play into, I think it, we discussed this last week, the notion of the episode playing into them. I think the episode is, I think it's really weird, isn't it? Because maybe we'll talk about it when I've not answered your question. We'll put a pin in it. But there's an element of, I feel like the show has answered the question, have these two forgiven each other and become friends? Quite a few. It feels like we're just getting the answer to that over and over again. And it almost would have been better if there was still a moment of doubt, but there isn't. Like, they're friends. We know they're friends. We know he's a good guy. I love the moment where he jumps in to save Katara. I love what it says about Azula, that she attacks Katara in a combat fight where she shouldn't be attacking anyone but Zuko. I love that moment. But it feels like either... It's like this halfway house where you could interpret it as they love each other, and you could interpret it as, oh no, see, they are friends. But I think, oh no, see, they are friends has already been answered substantially. Anyway, I think every pairing is brilliant, and I think Sokka, Toph, and Suki fighting in the air is a fantastic notion, and I think everything about those fights, including the White Lotus fight, which we've not really talked about, but just to say it's fucking awesome. I think everything about those battles and fights is perfect. I really do. So yeah, I hadn't even thought about the fact. You are right. Logically, Toph is arguably better with Zuko and Katara, but I think it's fantastic because I wouldn't change anything about it.
Or even the White Lotus. Like, she could have... Ba Sing Se would have fell very quickly if Toph had been around.
Well, they've got a kick-ass Earthbender.
Right. True.
And if you send Sokka and Zuki, who are both incredibly capable, but if you send them in to essentially at that point, let's not forget, face the Fire Lord. You're sending, if you just send those two, you're sending no Bender is with them. They haven't got a Bender with them, like they need. So yeah, I can't remember how they sort of, that was in the first two, how they sort of wrote around how it got divided up. Because I think whenever we talked about that, we got distracted by the fact that essentially Iroh was looking at the camera. But I think it makes sense. I don't think he
literally looks at the camera, but he basically looks at the camera. It's like it's implied looking at the camera. He's like, dear viewer, this is where everyone's going to go for the next exciting episode of Avatar.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, could you nitpick it? Yes. Does it make sense? Arguably not. Do I care? Nope, because what we have is fucking a visual feast for the eyes.
And
the heart and the soul.
I'll say as well that we do get a bunch of my favourite moments from this episode from that sequence, because we get that also. Speaking of comedy moments, we also get the other. I mean, again, it's another Toph blind joke, but we do get the great thing of, I don't think Boomerang's coming back this time, and then they're saved by Suki, and Toph's like, what happened? Did Boomerang come back? Which is just
it's brilliant.
Such a great idea. I have mixed feelings on Space Sword because I wish he'd done something with Space Sword before losing it, and you could argue he loses it when doing something with it, but we had a whole episode to him getting that sword, Chris.
Yeah, Yeah, true.
We dedicated a whole 22 minutes to him getting that sword, and in the end, he throws it at a bit of metal, and it cuts it, and then a soldier falls away, and then he goes, "Bye, space sword."
I'm sure we've seen him fight with it, haven't we?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
But like he's not done anything like it's not like it's not. Oh god, well, they're coming quick and fast this week. It's not it's not Neville chopping off Nagini's head, is it though? Importance wise, we spent a whole episode building up that sword. I want him to do something important with it. Take out a general or something with it. Not just some random foot soldier.
Yeah, or maybe instead of being on a convenient ledge, he could have dug the sword into the ship, and they could have been still hanging on like they are, but he's hanging on the sword.
Yeah, because they do that. When he falls, he uses the sword to slow them down. He sticks it in, and it slows them down. But then they come out of that, and then they're hanging on like a random bit of metal. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe used the sword to chop off the wing of one of the ships, so that it turned into the others. Instead of having Toph metal bend the ship's rudder a certain direction, have him slice one off with the sword.
That was awesome though, wasn't it?
It was cool.
That's the thing. Cool. It's so hard to nitpick any of these action scenes because they're all so good.
Yeah,
before talking about White Lotus, because we've not talked about that, I think personally, if I'm adding time to anything, whether it be Azula, whether it be their mum, you know what I'm adding time to? I'm adding time to Suki and Sokka. I'm clarifying that they're gonna try and stay together, or that they're not. Or I just think, there's just such a cool moment where she saves them, and he's like, "It was Suki." It's brilliant stuff. But I think that's a story we've been invested in that also doesn't get a conclusion. And I'm just a big fan of them as a couple. Personally, and that's a real personal one.
But is that so? My question to you about that though is: do you not think that they're a couple now? We've seen that.
It just feels
they've been a couple for a few episodes.
Yeah, I just feel like she's going to go off and be with the Warriors, as she should. By the way, I'm not. But I don't know. Are they going to survive long distance? Dan, is my question.
She can do both, can't she? She can be a Kyoshi warrior and have a boyfriend. I don't think those two are
absolutely
exclusive.
She can. But I want the episode to tell me that's definitely going to happen because I like them as a couple.
Yeah, I guess, but I figured that was implied enough by the previous episodes.
Fair.
But yeah, no, I think it's fair. It would be nice to see some sort of I'll come visit, something.
You know what I'm going to take us away from this to say something separate, but I've thought it and can't not say it. You know what I've just realised, Dan? Earlier on, we had that bit where you suggested a different way of him going into the Avatar state, and I suggested something they could then link to and do with that when they take over, and we were like, oh man, if we'd have been in the writer's room, and then 45 minutes later, something happened to clearly demonstrate why we would never get into the writer's room. Which is you not being bothered to think of an episode title for the podcast. And just calling it something else, something episode title. That's why we're not sitting in that finale.
Well, yeah, there's a million reasons to not do that. No, look, occasionally, Chris, we have a reasonably good idea, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean we're capable of doing anything that's happened here. Yeah.
The White Lotus battle.
The White Lotus battle. It's just one of those things where seeing them because look, there's something to be said for a tense, close battle where you feel the characters are at risk and there's tension for that reason, and then there's something to be said for if you're already doing that elsewhere, just to have a battle where they're just walking through them. Do you know what I mean? We look. Aang and the Fire Lord, full attention, the final Agnikai, the sort of Zuko Azula battle, which we'll come back to, I think, because I want to talk specifically about that because it's just incredible. Just visually alone, but from a story perspective as well. We've hinted at it. We've talked a little bit about it, but we'll do a separate bit. We talk about that in a minute. But yeah, the seeing the White Lotus just claim Ba Sing Se. And ending with that visual of Iroh burning the Fire Nation flag. Come on. Just come on. I didn't know how much I needed that. That's one of those things that I would have never said should be in the finale. Like, if you'd have said, if we were watching this for the first time, and before sitting down to watch these final 4 episodes, you'd have said, do you want to see, like, what do you want to see? That would have been nowhere on my list. It wouldn't have occurred to me to take back Ba Sing Se, and particularly to have Iroh conquer it, but conquer it back for the Earth Kingdom. The poetry of that alone is incredible. You know, the guy who failed to take Ba Sing Se for the Fire Nation all those years ago, to take it now, but with intent for the opposite side. Come on, like, that's mental. That's so good. But like, it would have never been on my list, because here's the thing: you assume defeat the Fire Lord, you free those places. Would you have been questioning it if they'd never covered that?
No, I wouldn't have. No, not at all.
Yeah, it's arguably something you do not need, but I'm so glad it is there, because it is absolutely incredible to see, both from a visual standpoint, seeing all the old masters just be absolute badasses, because why the hell not, right? But then from just a practical perspective, and from a story perspective, giving Iroh that kind of closure, incredible. Yeah,
it's beautiful, and just like you say, just the notion of them all working together, like seeing that group in action, the whole thing. And like I say, and I know I almost probably sound like I'm not paying attention, and I don't mean to. It's just like I just can't help myself but from going, yeah, so cool. Which is isn't good analysis, and I appreciate that.
Seeing not Master Paku, sorry, the other one, the Zhong, like, send big turrets of fire down the streets, because he's. Although I will say, it's supposed to be the Fire Nation he's fighting, and he's the only one that's flying about doing big blasts of fire. The Comet's here. Shouldn't all the Fire Nation guys be doing that? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's fine. He's a master. Maybe that's the difference. Seeing, like, Master Paku. No, not Master. Yeah, Master Paku. Freezing stuff, like, and making, like doing, like, a Frozone from The Incredibles. Sort of ice path and sliding along it, and then freezing a bunch of ships and tanks and stuff. Just getting to visually see those guys actually fight in a way that's not a training session was just a really neat thing that, again, I didn't know I wanted to see, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I thought it was, and like you say, just the character, what it does for the character of Iroh is just beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also like the payoff as well, really, for the whole White Lotus situation. You know, they many hints across many episodes about who and what the White Lotus are, and it makes so much sense that all these sort of wise, these older wise men that we've met across the seasons are actually part of a collective. It makes just a ton of sense. Yeah, no, I love that. There's literally nothing wrong with any of that. I can't even nitpick it in a small way. We've managed to find a couple of small things we were like about the sort of soccer, Toph, Suki side of it. Admittedly, not the most valid. Like, we're talking proper visit to nitpick corner for those. But this, I can't even think of those. It's perfect. It's
completely
just perfect.
Yeah, completely. What are some of your other general notes, Dan?
Well, I mean, we should probably talk about the final Agnikai as well before we get onto those, if that's okay. I just wanted to talk mostly. Well, let's talk. I mean, we can use this to talk generally about some of the things that we just know. We studied screenwriting at uni. It's come up before, but if you're a new listener, because sometimes people jump on for the finales. We focus on story and the events that are occurring in front of us and the characters and that stuff. But let's not dismiss the visuals and the music in these episodes is second to none. It's incredible. We kind of said it last week because I mentioned, there's a reason the Ember Island Players is kind of like a slightly lower budget, like sort of, episode. A lot less happening in it. The animation's a little bit simpler. It's to save money so they could do this, and this episode looks amazing, and the music is so epic, and the sound design is so incredible, and then the choice to not do music for the final Agnikai, but just have the slowed down whooshing sounds of the fire, and combined with the visual of the blue and red flames meeting each other. Just come on.
Beautiful. It was fantastic. Oh, it was amazing.
I don't know what else to say other than just, and also when all the characters are like bending fire and stuff, like the way light bounces off stuff in all of this stuff, in all of these battles, the way they play with like light and shadow and smoke and stuff is just incredible. I've got it up on my laptop now as I'm talking, and I'm just looking at like Aang and the Fire zipping around, and like the way the shadows hit them as the flames burst in and go down. It's just the attention to detail. It just looks incredible at all moments. But yeah, the final Agnikai specifically. How did we feel? Because obviously it's probably visually the most. Is it the most interesting fight that we get in this? And I mean, in an episode full of interesting fights, is this the best one? Azula, Zuko finally facing off.
I think so, because, well, it depends what you're after, really. Because I think obviously there's just the sheer amount of angst, etc., in the Aang fight. But I think visually, incredible, but comparatively less interesting things. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, than the orb of all of the elements and stuff. But there's a lot of shit being chucked at either one of them, depending on who's got the upper hand. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. All that shit getting chucked looks awesome, but if we're playing a comparison game, I always like the inventive stuff. So I really like Ba Sing Sang's fight because I like seeing all four elements in use and being used in different ways, creating the water and turning it into ice and sliding down, and then doing some kick-ass sword fighting, earth bending the earth so it blocks the Fire Nation tanks, all of that sort of stuff. Love that. But I think for maybe kind of almost, I think it's probably the best one because Ba Sing Sang and also Zuko, etc. Sokka, etc. in the air is visual spectacle and what the elements can do, and just what even people that can't bend can do, and it's kind of visual spectacle. The Aang fight is character and like character angst and great stuff. I think the fight between Azula and Zuko and Katara is the combination of the two, and therefore is potentially the best fight because it combines both. It's got these incredible visuals with the lightning, etc. The resolution of Katara doing the water and then basically using that to chain Azula up is fantastic.
So interesting, so clever. Yes.
So clever, so well executed. So I think it probably is the best fight because it is the perfect combination of those two things: visual spectacle and character angst.
And it's the fight with maybe the most tension for they could actually not win.
Yeah, completely.
I think that's the other thing. So you're right; it has everything. It's got creative stuff happening. It's got great visuals. It's got character stuff going on, and the threat is real. Whereas the other fights, in varying degrees, tick some but never all of those boxes.
I think so, personally.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Yeah, but it's that fight. It's just, and like we talked about earlier, it's the perfect culmination of what they've done to the Azula character over the course of the season, and then specifically these 4 episodes. I love that Zuko recognizes it, where he's like, I love that they're so military focused. That's a really small moment I love. Katara saying she's trying to divide us because she knows she can't take us both, and him saying, I know, but there's something different about her. She's, that I can do this, paraphrasing. I love everything about that. I love that they've got such a military awareness that they know what she's doing. I love that he recognizes in her that something's wrong, and therefore he can use that to his advantage. It's all good stuff.
Yeah. It's a great fight, and I think that her turning on Katara halfway through sort of is her, because I think an argument someone could make, I don't think I've ever seen someone say this, but I do think a debate could be made for Zuko doesn't get to win the Agnikai cleanly. But I think her turning to hit Katara with the lightning is her conceding the fight. She's lost to Zuko. That's the moment Zuko has won the Agni Kai. Because by attacking Katara and not Zuko, she's basically
forfeited it.
Yeah, she is. She's forfeiting, but it's because she's only doing that because she knows she can't beat him one-on-one anymore. She's Azula has proven herself to be quite a tactician over the course of this series, and she knows when to cut her losses. In fact, I think there's literally a scene where she says that, where she bails and goes, "I know when I'm defeated. Take care," and fucks off. Like, so, she's a smart girl. As much as she goes off the deep end on this this episode, these 2 episodes I should say. But yeah, I think what's crazy about it and what's really good about it is like I think you get to do both here, and it works really well. I don't think one takes away from the other. The Agni Kai itself, the one-on-one fight for the leadership of the Fire Nation, ends the moment she realizes she cannot beat Zuko, that he's ahead of her, and that instead the only way she's going to get out of this is if she tries to play dirty and goes for Katara, and that's when Zuko gets his hero moment, which is also a big character thing. I don't know, man, there's so much going on. It's a great fight. It's really good, and it's a good payoff for Azula and a good conclusion for Azula, and it's great to see that Zuko was assisted by Aang almost as much as he assisted Aang. Like, he couldn't beat Azula 2 seasons ago, and then he got kind of on par with her. We saw a fight where they were kind of a little bit more evenly matched. I remember them demonstrating that, and I remember thinking that's good that they've set that up now, because obviously at one point we're eventually going to have him overcome Azula. I didn't say that on the podcast, obviously, but I don't want to give it away. But that was my thinking. And then in this episode, he's learnt to firebend from a more peaceful place rather than from a place of anger and frustration, and where Azula has gone to this week, really, really heightened emotional place. And that's why you watch that fight and he's just calm and cool and collected and just repelling everything she sends at him and then throwing stuff back. It's so well done. Like, even in the animation just for the fight moves, we're getting character stuff for Zuko because we're seeing his state of mind in the way he's fighting. Come on. It's great.
And I think as well, you kind of have to have Katara win and end the fight, because the show has put a lot of stock in, will Aang go as far as killing the Fire Lord? An equal question that they've never asked is Zuko prepared to kill his sister? And you kind of feel like the answer is yes, but the show can't say that the answer is yes because, nobody dies apart from Jet. #justice for Jet. So I think you have to have Katara end it, and her in chains and her defeated, and you kind of have to have her break down, which is an incredibly powerful moment. You can't help but feel a little sorry for her in that moment. There's nothing vindicating about that moment because you're just like, fucking hell. Zuko was brainwashed and got out. She didn't get to get out, and this is how it's left her, and that's really tragic. And I think if you have Zuko end the fight, it only ends with one of them killing each other, and you can't have that, and it's not as powerful an ending because you don't get to properly explore the tragedy of Azula, which I think you do in the end that it gives. I got a logistics question, Dan, because the Previously On has multiple times flashed back to Katara's run out of spirit water. That's not an option.
Yes.
So is the notion that for severe injuries, she needs spirit water specifically, but for more generic injuries, like, I don't know, taking a shitload of lightning to the chest, she can just do with some bending and some regular water.
Yes.
Is that what it's telling me? Right.
Yeah, okay. I think so. Because
I just wanted to double check that.
The spirit water is got particularly strong magical properties for that, and regular water it can still be used for healing. Healing is taught at in the Northern Water Tribe. They teach healing as a sort of a subset of waterbending. And yeah, presumably they don't all have access to spirit water. So yeah, my assumption is it's just normal water can do healing. But if it was like you're on the edge of death, normal water probably won't be enough.
Yeah.
That's my assumption.
That's cool.
And that's kind of how the show sort of implies it, I think, as well too.
I just want to double check because they put that scene in the previously on so much.
I think they do that to sort of imply that if someone gets, because I think they keep wanting us to understand that lightning's real bad. Like if you get hit with lightning, you're not in a good. You're not. You're probably not going to make it out of that. Although Zuko does. So
yeah. But he's a firebender, so he's got. Do you know what I mean? I think he's
a firebender who's learned how to sort of like deflect lightning in the past. So maybe he takes it in and lets some of it out, so it doesn't hit him quite as hard, maybe as it did like Aang the previous season. So I don't know. Yeah,
I think that was fine. Yeah, I didn't bump up against that as an issue.
Yep.
So, what are some of your other sort of more general notes?
Other general notes: Iron Man Toph is the best thing I've ever seen ever, and I won't be told differently. I wrote that down. Just wrote that down.
I expected you to love that moment.
Yeah, love it. Play. One of my favorites. I what else? Oh, you can tell, Chris. Let's see if you can spot here in this very short sentence whether I was typing this on my laptop or my phone, where autocorrect might have been a factor. Aang faces off with the Firebird.
I feel like that might have been a phone note.
That was a phone note, Chris. You're right. The Firebird. He was the Phoenix King after all. Dear Lord. Did you enjoy that they made it specifically an Agni Kai? I know we just talked about it, but I wrote here that I really liked the choice that obviously Zuko was banished following an Agni Kai with his father. And last episode, Iroh kind of set him the task of restoring the Fire Nation's honor. And he's going to go do that through an Agni Kai with Azula.
Yeah, I like that. I think there's some poetry there.
Yeah, I thought so too. Apparently, when I wrote these notes. I will say as well, Zuko diving in front of Katara, I wrote the note here that it's not just about his relationship with Katara, but it's him demonstrating his honor being restored too, because he's sort of saying, because one of the things he says when Katara says we should fight her together, this is basically a trick, this whole Agni Kai thing. One of the things he says is, if it's one-on-one, no one else has to get hurt.
Yeah, I thought that was lovely.
So I thought that was a cool moment, because it's not just about he's saving Katara because she's his friend. He'd be doing that with basically anyone, because his arc is complete. It's happened again. I really like the moment where Aang has lightning thrown at him by the Firebird, and he takes it in, aims as if he's going to send it right back at the Firebird, but chooses not to, and sends it off into the sky.
Yeah.
Because they give us a really deliberate moment where Aang nearly kills him.
Yeah, like it's very powerful. And you, as an audience member, I don't think you ever think he's going to do it. But just the way sort of his hand returns from the Avatar state when you see that first, it's constructed very nicely.
That's the point, actually. They do it twice, don't they? So there's the point when he's not in the Avatar state and the Fire Lord hits him with lightning, and he takes in the lesson from Zuko and absorbs the lightning and holds his hand out to aim it right back at the Fire Lord, and then chooses to send the lightning up into the sky instead. And then there's the moment when he's in the Avatar state, when he's gathering all the elements and about to pummel the Fire Lord with what would theoretically be the final blow, one that would kill him. And that's when because he has such control now, he comes out of the Avatar state and is like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the water just sort of splashes down on the Fire Lord with the pebbles and stuff. And it's like, you know what, actually, that changes my thoughts on something we've already talked about, remembering that. Because it's not about Aang having control of when he goes into the Avatar state. It's about Aang having control of when he comes out of it. Because the big fear he had following the end of season 1 was that he would hurt people in the Avatar state and go against his own spirit and his own desire not to kill. That was his thing, wasn't it? He was scared of the Avatar state because he didn't 100% feel like he was in control. In this episode, I guess that's the completion of that arc for him. He goes into the Avatar state, he's about to deliver the final blow to the Fire Lord, and his own personal instincts and preferences kicked in, brought him out of the Avatar state, and then he was in control again.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah. So that
and now he just going forward has that control. I don't think he needs to get hit in the back every time he wants to go into the Avatar state moving forward.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is, I guess if we're gonna do that, we don't necessarily need to really go into too much detail explaining how he gets into it again, because really the concern was making sure he didn't go too far once inside of it. And that's really the more important character arc. So actually, that brilliant idea we had earlier, we were so proud of, that we decried ourselves worthy of being in the writer's room. I think actually we were wrong. Because while that might have been better than the moment we got in that moment, in the overall episode, it's not really what Aang's arc needed. Aang's arc needed to be focused on a choice being made at the end of his time in the Avatar state, not at the beginning.
Yeah, that's fair. But you know what they say I always say when it turns out that I've misjudged something or I've got it wrong. I always say that classic, renowned piece of wisdom, something episode title. That's what I say whenever I feel that way. So just something episode title. It's all good.
There you go. I really liked Aang catching himself with water when he's falling out the sky, where he sort of pulls the water up to meet him and then swooshes in and then swooshes out again. I thought that was really cool visual. Sound and visuals, obviously, for the Agnikai we've already talked about, but just the blue versus red with this choice to not have music but to use the sound of the flame swooshing in sort of slow motion. Just beautiful. Yes, please. A little bit of a credit here for Mark Hamill. Fire Lord's a pretty low-key character in this show in terms of like how much we see him and interact with him and hear him talk. In this episode and the previous one, he gets to be full-on cartoony villain, and it's fucking brilliant. And he's clearly having an absolutely great time doing this. And particularly at the end of the first episode when he's winning, and he's all like, prepare to die, and he's like throwing the fire at Aang, and he's just like going mad and fucking great. He was having a great time, and I was having a great time watching him have a great time. Mark Hamill, 10 points.
Agreed.
I actually noted as well at the end of that first episode that I thought it was cool that they lined up the end of the first episode with Zuko being hit with lightning and the oh my god, it's just Firebird again. How has that happened 3 times? Fucking hell. I really did. You can tell I did these notes on my phone really badly. But ending on Zuko being hit with lightning and Aang being sort of cornered by the Fire Lord is a great sort of Empire Strikes Back ending.
Well, and Toph and Sokka, etc., are like plummeting. Like they do. I noticed that on this rewatch. They do a really great job of ending episode 3 on a note of everyone's fucked.
I don't even remember the situation for the other two. I just think that's fun. Yeah, that's great.
I think because I've got the episode here. Let me see if I can pull it exactly. So the last we see of them...
Oh, it's them getting separated from Suki.
Yeah, it's like her falling and stuff. So yeah, like it's kind of everyone's in a bad way. They're crashing and she falls.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Oh yeah, they tumbled onto another ship. We've just lost Suki, and then everything's crumbling around them. And Sokka looks up all scared, and then we cut away from that, and we don't see them again now until the next episode. You're right. Spot on. Very good. It's just because it happens a few minutes before the end. I didn't put that together, but you're absolutely right.
One random quick note for me while you're saying about cool visuals, because we've not really talked about it a lot, and people might be going, why have you guys not discussed this? I personally haven't brought it up, because other than the few times it's briefly come up, because I don't have much more to say other than it looks awesome. But obviously, that visual of all 4 elements working in unison around Aang in the Avatar state is phenomenal. Like it's really inventive. It looks really cool. It's great stuff.
Yeah, it's a really clever way to sort of show that he's achieved it. He's reached it. He's learned all 4 elements. Here he is, master of everything. Like just they're circling him, like these rings. Like it's just to demonstrate his full control of the things that are around him. Like it's great. It's a really cool visual, mildly terrifying, which I think is fine when he's in the Avatar state.
And the other cool visual I wanted to bring up, that's sort of my last sort of random note, was the guy, the old guy who's the Earthbender in the White Lotus group. what's his name?
The Earthbender's Boomy, right?
Boomy. I love that Boomy chucks the rock in the tanks, so he renders the tanks useless and unable to fire anymore. And then he thinks, fuck it, I'm also going to create a big spike and put them all on that. Like, I just love the extra, like, fuck you. Like, you've defeated them, you've destroyed them, but still gonna render them even more useless than that.
Yeah, agreed.
So did you have any last notes before we?
I've got a couple from the final, because most of those ones I just gave up from the first episode, but I've got a couple from the final one. The moment when Azula is like off to the side, tied up, laughing and crying and breathing fire all at once is one of the most haunting things I've ever seen. So upsetting.
Yeah.
We've already talked about it, but I do want to just give another shout out to the moment where Katara outsmarts Azula, because it's her moment to be badass. And it's fucking great. And because we've done so much time in the show, like, Katara outsmarting someone in any other episode and any other character, you're just like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, the good guys come out on top there, that's good. But for me, because it's Azula, who we've spent so much time sort of setting up as being, brilliant and clever and hard to outthink, having Katara outthink Azula rather than outfight Azula, because obviously the comet's overhead and Azula would probably overpower Katara in this current situation, I think that's just genius. And also, there is genuine threat. When Zuko's out and there's a whole sequence where it's like just Azula hunting Katara, there's a point when you go, I don't know how she gets out of this. And then when it happens, in the way it happens, it's just so clever. And it's also beautifully animated, but yeah. 10 points to the
it's like the triumph builds when she looks down and sees the water, which I was surprised that they had a big grate full of a tunnel of water, but fair play.
You gotta have a water system, I suppose. You gotta get water around. People wash in the Fire Nation, I assume.
Yeah, people drink. Yeah,
people drink. You might need fountains or whatever, so there's got to be water moving about the city somehow, I guess. But yeah, or it could even be decorative. I don't know. The music in general, especially the music I noted being particularly good is the moment when Aang overcomes and energy bends the Fire Lord. That music is glorious. Give it all the awards retrospectively.
Music in general in this episode is brilliant.
Yes. The two things we haven't talked about actually from the sort of coda, May is out of prison, and we have Firebird Zuko now. I can't believe this kept happening.
Look,
how have we done, Chris? How have we done? Like, just shy of 60 episodes of this, and this is the first time I've had not just one, but like 4 different instances where the word Fire Lord has become Firebird in my phone, and it it won't stop doing it.
It's weird because you've clearly, made notes on your phone in the past.
Yes,
so
I know.
That is weird. Maybe you've changed the setting. Look, Firebird Zuko, great, like, fantastic, obviously genius, obviously right, great ending. Him and Aang hugging and having that moment is really sweet and really nice. The Ty Lee thing is funny because it actually does make complete sense. She did turn. She did, it's never felt like she particularly, it's more about, she's felt very forced into action, and now she doesn't have to be forced into action by Azula. She can do what she wants to do, which is kind of fight but have fun. Like, it makes complete sense. Maybe I wish they had a little bit more time to explore it a little bit more, because you have to think about it. Like, the episode doesn't do that thinking for you. You have to think about it. It is obviously quite funny as well that Ty Lee's always had this sort of slightly flirty thing with soccer and is now in a group with his girlfriend.
Yes.
It's all a really good idea. It's a shame they didn't get a little bit more time with it, but it's absolutely the first thing you cut. It's like my spoilers for, but there's deleted scenes from the Office finale where, is it Duke? Is it Clark?
I can never remember those two characters' names.
Yeah, but it's Clark. Clark is the character's name, and it's the character played by Clark Duke. And there's a series of deleted scenes where we realise he has a little love interest, and he could get the star and the glory, and he chooses to stay. He chooses to not chase the things he's been chasing all the way through the show, and instead chooses to stay with the girl and chooses to stay at Dunder Mifflin. And it's a really sweet moment. And as a fan of that character and actor, I love those deleted scenes. And part of me wishes they were in the episode. But when you have a time constraint and you need to cut something, that's absolutely the thing you cut. And I feel the same way about this. We don't need any more than we get on Tylee joining them, but it's a shame. But it's absolutely the thing you cut if you need to cut something. So
and we still get it and can fill in the gaps. It's like it's there enough. What did you? Because I 100% I echo your thoughts on that. So I don't know if I have much more to add on it. I think it's a really fun, logical thing to do with Tylee, and I'm just glad we got some sort of coda with her because she's mostly been forgotten since her moment of betrayal with Azula. Because it felt like kind of her purpose was to have that moment to push Azula to where Azula is. And they don't really have anything else to do with her after that, but finding a nice little ending for her, I think, is important. She has been a regular character in the show, and I would have been sad if we didn't see her in the finale, and that just makes a ton of sense. I'm more curious to your thoughts on May returning and helping Zuko. Now, obviously, the last time they interacted was she saved him from Azula, and then said, "I love him more than I fear you." So we knew how she felt about Zuko. How did you feel about seeing them sort of reunited?
Yeah, I thought that was nice. I think because we had that moment, because the last moment was her admitting that, and he knew that, she knew that. I think it works. Like, I didn't bump up against it in any way. I think it's nice to kind of, again, it's that sort of... I think that's a good example. A lot of the threads that we've talked about either being wrapped up or left hanging take time either way. That thread... You literally just need that moment and you can tie it up. So why wouldn't you tie up a thread that you can tie up in 2 lines of dialogue and a kiss? So yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's those. We get Aang in a brand new outfit. I like the new outfit. Much more sort of honouring his sort of airbender monk sort of heritage than the outfit he generally wears, which has always been an airbender outfit, but I really like... the long necklace like Monk Gyatso, and it's like he's allowing himself to sort of get back to his sort of roots now. He's sort of solved the immediate problem at hand, and I just think that's really neat.
I like that, and he seemed very zen, didn't he?
He did, and we get that great exchange, which you already hinted at, but I just want to comment on the exchange of dialogue, the whole "now we're friends, we'll rebuild it together" exchange. The idea that the Avatar and the Fire Lord are once again team up. The old Avatar and Fire Lord were friends and fell apart and became enemies. These guys were enemies and became friends. And
yeah, it's nice.
I just like that. I like the symmetry of it. And it also comes back to that line of dialogue from God knows how many episodes ago. The Storm, I think, or the one after the Storm, where Zuko saves Aang because he doesn't want Zhao to catch him. He wants to capture him. And there's that thing of, I'd like to think that if things were different, we'd have been friends. And Zuko just blasts fire at him, and then here we are. And the idea that they're going to rebuild the world together, that makes sense. Zuko with political power and Aang with his avatar powers. Between the two of them, they can right the wrongs. I think that's nice.
Yeah, and again, it almost makes me, there's got to be some sort of danger or issues in Korra. So where did it go wrong? That's what I want. Yeah. Again, I'm always disappointed to know there's a sequel.
Yeah, because it does feel like you want the world to have gone right after this, right? Yeah.
I hope the sequel. The really obvious thing to do is to go. There were still pockets of the Fire Nation that believed in the old ways, and there's been an uprising in them. That for me is the most obvious thing to do with the sequel. But I kind of hope I don't want to see Fire Nation versus others. I hope they do something different to that, is my hope for Korra.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a sensible and reasonable thing to wish for. We'll cover it when we cover it. I'm excited to come to that.
Yeah. Is it time to triv it up, Dan?
Sorry, 1 or 2 more very quick things. Sorry, I didn't realise how much more stuff I had. So sorry.
Come on.
I just wanted to make note of 2 other things. The fact that they're back in Iroh's tea shop and Zuko is serving, showing that even though he's Fire Lord now, The Firebird is perfectly capable of humbling himself and serving tea.
I tell you, that's why it could go wrong in Korra. Fucking stop serving tea and do some lording. Jesus.
Yeah. And then
maybe put down the kettle and do some fucking work.
And then the final thing, which is I just really liked, and it's so subtle and small, and I've never noticed it before, but it's the shot of the Earthbender kids just freely knocking a rock back and forth with the tanks in the background. The reason that shot means a lot to me, or meant it had more impact and meaning to me in this viewing than previous ones, is we talked a lot about like the Fire Nation's oppression of the Earthbending, and like we've been to many towns in which we've discovered that anyone who's caught Earthbending was imprisoned and or killed by the Fire Nation. They suppressed that the same way that they took out the Airbenders, and the same way that they used to take waterbenders out of the water tribes, like Hammer, the puppet master herself. So we've seen a lot of that, and seeing these two young kids freely earthbending in a town that a day before was under Fire Nation control was just this very subtle, the next generation will be okay. And I know that's small, but it's just, look, these kids, there's new earthbenders coming up. The balance is restored, things will go back to normal. It's just a nice moment.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah. No, I agree.
So you ready, Chris, to say the thing?
Let's trivia it up!
We're going to give you some trivia. So Joaquim dos Santos won Best Directing in an Animated Television Production at the 2008 Annie Awards for directing the episode. Deserved. It's great.
Very much deserved.
Azula's long and dishevelled hair is evocative of Awai. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Sorry, no, that's exactly how that's pronounced. And if you're saying it differently, it's because you've got it wrong. A classic villain... I don't know why I decided to say that. I was like, no, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to pretend I definitely got it right.
Fucking hell. Calm down.
A classic... so that's a classic villainess in Japanese legend and kabuki theatre. The Awai, or Owa, was a married woman whose husband killed her in order to marry a younger, wealthier woman, and thus her spirit was enraged enough to come back, to sort of cross back over the land of the living and exact a bloody revenge. So that's what the visual, that dishevelled sort of half cut but incorrectly hair that's all in front of the face and stuff is sort of evocative of. It's a cool visual. Works really well.
Nice.
Aang firebends in this episode more than in any other. And this is a result of Sozin's Comet obviously enhancing his firebending, making it more powerful. I probably should have cut that trivia because that's just in the episode, but there you go. The fire in the Fire Lord's throne room is now blue and has been made blue. So the Fire Lord's throne room has all these like fires bursting out along the sides, like decorative fires, presumably coming from some sort of lamp system. But those are now, they've been turned blue to represent Azula's blue flame, which I think is neat. Okay. This is a bit of a weird one because this bit of trivia kind of actually sort of implies, unless you can make sense of this, Chris, it implies maybe a little bit of an inconsistency. So in a previous episode, Iroh states that complete control of emotions was required to successfully generate lightning. Azula successfully generates lightning multiple times despite her declining mental state. What do you think?
So read it to me again.
Just more proof.
No, I was listening. No, I just want to get my head around the wording.
Okay, sorry. For a second, I thought it was like...
Hold on. No. Before you do, let me just state, I'm aware the question you're essentially asking is, Iroh has said you need a clear mental state to bend, and because Azula hasn't got a clear one, how can she still be bending lightning? So I was listening. Let me have the wording.
Yeah, that's fine. That's no problem. It's because when you ask me to repeat something in trivia, that's usually because you weren't listening. So I was just going back to I'll
give you that, Dan. Yeah. But in this instance, I was listening.
Fair enough. So it's the way it's phrased here is, although Iroh had previously stated that complete control of emotions was required to successfully generate lightning, Azula successfully generates lightning despite her declining mental state.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like I haven't got.
Yeah, I was a little bit. Yeah, is she just that good?
I think that's why. Yeah, I think that's why I got you to repeat it, because I was like, well, there must be a workaround for it, and I can't think of one.
Yeah, I can't either. What Chris, you were doing essentially was buying for time. You were just like,
Yep.
Yeah. Repeat the question, Dan, while I see if I can make an explanation for this one, because I don't like there to be an inconsistency in this show. No, it does feel weirdly inconsistent.
It does feel inconsistent. Yeah,
you could fansplain it as Azula's just that good at firebending.
I think that is the explanation, isn't it?
Yeah.
That has to be.
Yeah. So this episode is the first time that non-contact metal bending is performed. Prior to this episode, Toph was only...
Wait. Sorry to go back on that last point. To be fair, Zuko recognizes that she's not quite at top form, so is able to beat her from a bending perspective based on that. So it has knocked her bending skills down a bit.
Mm-hmm. She's just still able to produce lightning. Lightning, which actually we just observed, didn't seem as damaging as lightning has previously done, because it doesn't kill Zuko the way it probably should when it hits him.
Yes. So I think she has been affected, but she's so good that she's not completely unable to bend.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm on board. I like it. There we go. We found a way around it. We can sleep well at night. This is the first time that non-contact metal bending is performed. So prior to this episode, or these episodes, Toph demonstrates the ability to metal bend, but she always has to make physical, direct contact with the metal to do it, so essentially moulding it after channeling the sort of minute earth impurities within, whereas in this episode, she sort of bends metal the way you might bend rock from a distance by sort of like, doing a movement and it then reacting. It's the first time we've seen her be able to get good enough to do it that way, implying that there are still some like things that she's learning about metal bending. But cool.
That's cool.
Good. The music sound design for Zuko and Azula's Agni Kai drew inspiration from Ghost in the Shell and Blade Runner, particularly in pairing slow tempo and melancholy mood with an intense action scene, filtering down the sound of the fire effects in favour of score. So that's what inspired that choice. It's a good choice. It worked really well.
Nice.
So this is a really interesting one, Chris. This is a really interesting one. So originally, these two episodes were conceived as a single episode that would have been a 3-part series finale. So it would have had, we would have had essentially the first episode that was sort of like the raising the problem of what's Aang going to do with the file. The second episode being the one where he interacts with the lion turtle, and then the third episode being the fight itself. But what happened was, once they sat down and actually plotted it all out, they had too much story to fit in one episode and divided it into two, which is why I think the other two episodes still feel like self-contained stories with their own little beginning, middle, and end. And these last two
definitely
are just one thing. They just flow straight into each other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm not surprised to hear that, and as we discussed, that's actually, I think, the better way of viewing it. 1, 2, and then 3.
Yeah, agreed.
As we discussed last week.
So all that trivia was from the first part of these last two, but these last few bits are from the second part. So in the episode's commentary and during a panel at San Diego Comic-Con in 2008, it was revealed that there was a mid-credit sequence where they showed Zuko finding his mother, Ursa. It was sketched out and even done as a storyboard, but it did not make it into the production due to a final request by Michael Dante DiMartino, one of the two creators, presumably because he was thinking about whether that story could be told in a feature we talked about, or eventually the comic book.
That absolutely smacks of no, save that, doesn't it?
It does to me, yeah.
Let's keep something in the locker.
I would agree. So yeah, I don't have any real feelings about that either way. I think the choice to remove it is probably benefited the episode. Although, again,
yes,
arguably there are several fans out there that feel like they wanted more closure on that and would have benefited from that. So there you go.
Which I completely understand.
Yeah. The series' music editors and composers, Jeremy Zuckerman and Benjamin Wynn, were nominated for a Golden Reel Award for Best Sound Editing in a Television Animation for their work in this episode. Again, very deserved. Very glad to see people are getting awards for this episode because it is brilliant. This final episode is the only episode in the entire series to use a different track during the closing credits. Different piece of music. So I thought that was interesting. Oh, this one's interesting. When Aang goes into the Avatar state and he summons the different elements to him, he does it in reverse order. Air, fire, earth, and water. Rather than water, earth, fire, and air.
Do you think they realised people would notice the Captain Planet comparisons we noticed last week?
And then they just put
mixed it up?
I think that's exactly what happened, Chris. I think we've nailed it. Correct.
Case closed.
So as the four elements circle him, in terms of their proximity to Aang, the order they're in, closest to farthest, is the way Aristotle said elements place themselves in nature. Earth, water, air, and fire. And this is also not the Avatar cycle. So that's two instances of it not following the Avatar cycle, one in reverse and then one obviously just in practical, just like different. I don't know if that's a coincidence that it matches the Aristotle thing, or if it's just, or if it's something they designed. I don't know, but it's just an interesting thing to note. So there you go.
Fair play.
So some never seen before bending techniques are used in this episode, including remote water bending. I don't know. Oh, I guess they mean where Katara brought up the water and froze it and then got out of it and moved inside the water and stuff. Compressed rock bullets, which I thought was really cool. Long-range multiple fire whips and strong winds capable of eroding a large rock pillar. That's just some of them listed. But yeah, there's a bunch of new cool stuff we see in this episode, which we didn't give credit for, so I left that in the trivia, because even though that's just a thing that's in the episode, I thought it'd be nice to actually have some specifics as to some of the cool things they did in this one.
That is cool.
We've covered that. While in the Avatar state, the slicing motion Aang makes to deal the final blow to Ozai is the same motion he made in his nightmare about being in the Avatar state and going too far. So his nightmare came true and then he overcame it, which I think is cool.
That's cool.
This is the only episode in this season in which Aang enters the Avatar state. Yeah, that's true, because obviously he lost the power to do that at the end of the previous season. The episode was... That trivia has made it in twice, Chris. The episode was initially conceived as a singular episode for a 3-part season, but they realised the story they couldn't fit and divided it into 2. I don't know how that happened, but there you go.
You were that excited by that piece of trivia, Dan. That's what happened there.
Twice. The final piece of trivia, Chris, that this episode pulled in an average of 5.6 million total viewers and achieved the highest rating that the show ever got between between kids aged 6 to 11 and teens. That's awesome. 5.6 million viewers in total is absolutely bonkers.
And it's not, it's a movie. Like, that's a fair bit of commitment from kids sitting down and watching it.
Yeah. Very cool.
Presumably it aired in a 2-hour time slot.
Yeah.
So, wow. Fair play. Those are huge numbers for a 2-hour time slot.
Yeah, no, agreed. 100% agreed. Because that's the average as well. So that's so it will have been higher than that at some points and lower than that at some points. But like, for that to be the average is impressive, I think.
I watched a documentary about Nickelodeon the other day, because sometimes you forget about how fragile life is and how you shouldn't waste time. And it was like an entire 90-minute hour long
honestly, mate, we can't talk. I can't talk. I watched a 2-hour documentary on how queuing works at Disneyland.
We'll have to talk more about that at some other point.
Let me tell you, if we're doing recommendation, it's brilliant. It's a great documentary.
And to be fair, the Nickelodeon one was good as well, but Avatar didn't come up at all, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
Well, I think it was because it was more about the origins, and they sort of ended it on SpongeBob. They sort of basically, the end of the documentary was, and then SpongeBob hit, and it all became about replicating SpongeBob and lost its heart and all of that sort of stuff. So I guess Avatar didn't fit with that narrative, but I was definitely sat there going, "Come on, where's your mentioning of Avatar?" But those viewing figures are amazing. That's phenomenal.
So we do actually have, Chris, a listener question. I thought it'd be nice to get one in for the last episode, and I was about to ask if anyone had one, and someone just supplied one on the Patreon, and it's someone I don't think we've had before. I won't read out full name because they have got their full name there, and I'm not sure if that's just that I can see it or if they've made it visible. So to be safe, I'm just going to refer to Robert. But if you would like to ask a question on one of these when we come back to do Korra, and we're going to talk about when that will be in a minute. We need to cover what we're going to be doing next because we've made a bold choice that's going to probably kill us, and I'm very excited to talk about that. But and I also want to do a quick get some final thoughts from you, Chris, on the series as a whole, if that's okay as well. But
yeah, I don't need to eat. No, I'm joking. Go on, carry on.
Hey, I ate before we started, mate. I was there.
Couldn't. I was. Yeah, go on, carry on.
I
literally had no food. As you know. Yeah, go on, carry on.
Robert asks, question for the end, whenever that comes. What was your favourite fight scene of the series, and why was it the last Agni Kai? So, I don't want that to be the answer, but I think it's the answer. So I did some Googling, Chris, to look up some other, iconic fights from the show. And there are some great ones. Zuko versus Commander Zhao. They had an Agni Kai in the Southern Air Temple, which was great. Obviously Zuko and Katara, Siege of the North. I liked Sokka and Master Piandao in Sokka's Master, and he's chasing him around, and you think he's turned on him, but he hasn't. Iroh fighting the Dai Li at the end of last season. Just so many great fights. Even Katara versus Hammer, from the Puppet Master episode, is an incredible fight sequence. But it's
and the Aang versus Bimi as well.
Aang Bumi from the first Omashu episode, or even I don't know if you remember, we both really liked. There was a fight. I can't remember what episode it's from. It's the episode where they're at the Abbey, and they're tracking them down with that lady that has the weird anteater that can smell, and they trick that by pushing the perfumes over and breaking them. And then there's a fight between Aang and Zuko where they fight on like a well, and they're both like stepping on the well on the edges of it while fighting.
Yeah. I know the one you mean.
I can't remember the name of the episode, but that episode, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. That might be Botto or the Water Tribe, actually. Anyway, so there are a lot of incredible fights, but I still think that annoyingly, I do think the answer is the answer in the question. And I'd like to be interesting and give a different answer, but I do think it's the best fight.
Yeah, there's an element of I've only seen the show once. I'd have to re-watch the fights or look up an article. But I think of what comes to mind, and it might be biased because we've just watched it, but I'd say that, or I'd interpret it not. I don't want to not answer. I think if I'm forced to answer the question, I agree. Zuko versus Azula. I'm
glad we got a last Zuko in.
Yeah,
that feels poetic.
But I will say another thing I'd point to in this last episode still is Toph covering herself in earth and then fighting on the ship, because it antiphesizes, if that's the right word, or exemplify, whatever the word is, that represents what I love most in what I personally enjoy watching in fights in Avatar, which is people using bending in interesting ways. That's what I'm after. I'm after the thing that makes me go, oh, that looks fucking cool, and I've never seen that before. And that Toph moment in this final episode, in terms of fight scene, I completely, Zuko versus Azula. In terms of what I look for in fight scenes, it's that I look for, and that's a really strong example of it. And I think it's why the fighting in this show is so impressive, because they are able to chuck in a cool visual to do with bending that we've never seen before. And that's amazing. And that's why I think the fights are so impactful on this show specifically. Yeah. So I think it's Zuko versus Azula, but I'd like to take the question as an opportunity to say what I look for in fights in Avatar is cool shit being done with fire, water, wind, and earth.
It's lots of cool stuff happening while you're summoning Captain Planet. Two quick things. I just rewatched that. While you were talking, I just put it on my laptop in front of me while I was listening to what you were saying, and watched Toph take an entire metal door, wrap it around herself to create an Iron Man suit, and then blast through that room. That is fucking awesome. It's just incredible. So good.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
But the other thing I would say as well is that the thing is, yes, that is what you're looking for with a good Avatar fight, and many of them have it. What's frustrating is the reason it's the last Agni Kai, we talked about it being maybe better than the fight between Ozai and Aang, is because it had a bit of everything. It had character stuff happening in it. It had tension. There was a point when we thought they might lose. It has good stuff for Zuko, but it also has a creative use of bending because of how Katara wins that fight. So it does really tick every box. Although, would you consider that a separate part of the fight? Actually, that's a fair point. Because the way that the question came from Robert was it, referred to it as the final Agni Kai, but as we established, the Agni Kai kind of ends at the moment she attacks Katara. So I don't know if you count that part as part of it or not.
No, but that's just like the name of the scene, isn't it? Like, that's the name of the fight. Like, I think that's splitting hairs.
Sure. Speaking of splitting hairs, Chris, very quickly, on the debate of whether it's an anime or not, I'm going to say this to listeners. Depends on if you think anime has to be produced in Japan to be anime. So my answer is your answer, depending on how you feel about that. If you think anime has to be made in Japan, then I'm agreeing with you and correct. It's not an anime. If you think anime is more of a description of a style, an approach to animation that can be produced anywhere in the world, then you're right, and I agree with you.
I think, given my lack of expertise and exposure to animation in general, let alone anime specifically, it would be quite bold of me to comment on it. But I will. I think, you've commented on it, and I should comment on it. So, maybe I don't have the knowledge to say something so profound in answer to that question, but I'm just going to say something episode title.
Very good.
Is my answer.
Very good. The other thing that we need to do before we get to explain what we're doing next, Chris, is the sort of final thoughts from yourself, because obviously we sit down to do this. You'd gotten into the show a bit. You'd watched it a couple of years ago, but you'd sort of didn't quite make it to that past the first season. Your own sort of feelings on animation were, there were a lot of animated shows that you acknowledged were good, but just weren't for you. There was a sense of that. We did Steven Universe, and now it sort of forced you into watching that, and obviously that's a show you ended up falling in love with. Avatar is a different show. It's from an earlier era. It's maybe not as far along the lines of being this masterful piece of really artful television that's doing all these really clever things as Steven Universe. But Steven Universe all equally can't exist without this having come before it, and sort of redefined what a kids show can be. But obviously it's interesting that you've done it kind of backwards, arguably. So with that all in mind, and your history with animation in mind, and your history particularly with this show in mind, what are your sort of thoughts on the show now, having seen it top to bottom?
Yeah, I liked it.
Cool. All right.
Do you want a bit more?
Something. Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I think it's fantastic. I think if you were to ask me what I would say is my favourite or the better show, I know you're not asking me that, but I would say Steven Universe. But what's interesting is I would rewatch Avatar before I would rewatch Steven Universe, because I think it's incredibly accessible. I think the range, because it almost feels a bit more adult than Steven Universe, not in the themes, but in sort of the hooks. It's
the storytelling techniques and the structure of the episodes.
The techniques.
It has the structure of a live action show sometimes, Avatar, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's got the action, it's got the different, I'd follow along for the character stuff. Almost in terms of rewatching, I'd like to see the relationship between Zuko and the gang unfold, knowing where it goes. Same with Sokka and Suki, who, as we know, I'm a big fan of. Toph, I'm a big fan of. So I think, it's not as intricate. It's not got this kind of mythology behind it, but actually, it's incredibly accessible, and it's just kick ass, isn't it? Like, there's just so much cool action and visual spectacle. It's such a satisfying ending. It builds to such a satisfying ending. That I really, really have ended up enjoying it. I don't think and I know you weren't asking for a comparison, but that's kind of the easiest thing to do in a way to demonstrate feelings of it. I don't think I have the love and the warmth. I don't think I've learnt from it in the way I learnt from Steven Universe. I don't think the show means more to me than Steven Universe does. I wouldn't like to say for sure which I preferred, because I love them both, but there's something so inherently enjoyable and it's such a good watch. Do you know what I mean? So whilst I'm not maybe gushing in the way I did about Steven Universe, which literally I think, like I say, I learned a lot of stuff from Steven Universe. I take the lessons of Steven Universe with me in how I try and interact with people. I don't engage with this on that level, but I think it's actually in some ways still the better watch, and is still just such a satisfying watch as well. And just not popcorn in the way people use popcorn television as a bit of an insult these days, but it's just real. Let's go along for the roller coaster, and what a satisfying roller coaster it is. TV.
Yeah. No, I think
so. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, I think that's. I think you've got it. I think that's it. It's spot on. I think it is. It's definitely a more accessible show. I don't think
it's the show I would. If someone said to me, "You got an animation I should check out," I would point them to Avatar before I point them to Steven Universe.
That point, because that's an interesting one. On that point, do you think there's an element of that? Is it because Steven Universe is harder to get into at first? Is if Steven Universe got possibly to Lapis 10 episodes earlier, and didn't do some of that stuff that you weren't as fond of at the very beginning, would that be? Does the rest of Steven Universe, with that entry point being smoothed out, does that make Steven Universe the more watchable show?
I still think maybe, but even when Steven Universe hooks you in, I still think Avatar is the more accessible show.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're a certain type of person, and there are certain mates that I would point to Steven Universe to first, but there are some mates that aren't gonna fucking give it the time of day regardless. I got mates that aren't gonna listen, aren't gonna take it in, aren't gonna watch, and those same mates would probably go, "Oh yeah, I'm invested enough in Avatar." So yes, I think that's a factor, but even when you get past that point, I still think Avatar is more accessible to a general audience.
Well, there you go.
I think Steven Universe is the show. I think Steven Universe is the show everyone should be watching. I think everyone should be forced to sit down and watch Steven Universe. I think the world would. I think the world would be a better place if everyone has seen Steven Universe and took the lessons on board that show is looking to teach you. But if you don't want to be taught a lesson, but still be taught some things. But if you just want to be entertained, I think sit down and watch Avatar.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think that is a really good final thought. I think that's right. I think that's correct. I think you've nailed it.
But Dan, yes. What are you forcing me to watch next?
Okay, let's cover that. So, I had an idea. For years I've talked about this, about going back to these, because I I'm gonna say it's true. I'm gonna rip the Band-Aid off. The J.K. Rowling thing aside, I would consider myself a fan of the Harry Potter books, but not the films. I've never really cared for the films. I think there are some good things about them, but mostly they're a bit of a mess. I've always maintained that they're made very well on the whole, with a couple of qualms about turning the wands into guns, which we'll get to, I think. I've always talked about, I think the films are relatively poorly written. They make a lot of bad choices in terms of what information is kept and what information is dropped. But, a lot of them I've not watched since they originally aired. I don't think I've seen Deathly Hallows Part 1, Part 2 since they were in the cinema. I don't think. So we realised that with this summer, the Secrets of Dumbledore, whatever it's called, will have been out. And
it's cool
come and go.
It's to so far, early buzz is not good.
Yeah, I'm certain. Of that, I'm sure. We realised there would be exactly 11 Harry Potter films if we include the 3 Fantastic Beasts, Crimes of Grindelwald, Secrets of Dumbledore. So we sort of, I said, man, we could theoretically dedicate a whole Rewind Review series to it. And Chris rightly said, that wouldn't really feel like Rewind Reviews, though, would it? So we're going to be doing our normal series of Rewind Reviews following this, as scheduled. But then following that, instead of jumping straight into Korra, we're going to give ourselves a little break from the world of Avatar, which I think is probably correct. And instead, we're going to be doing Harry Potter and the Rewind Reviews, where we're going to basically go from Philosopher's Stone right through to Secrets of Dumbledore, 11 weeks. And then we're going to do another series of Rewind Reviews, normal, to cover through Christmas, where I believe we've already pretty much established that we're going to be covering the Santa Claus movies for the Christmas specials. And then following that, we'll be at Korra, basically in... Wait, that can't be right. I've done this wrong. Have I worked this out wrong? Oh, I have worked this out wrong.
But that's still the plan. The date doesn't matter. The plan is Rewind Reviews, Harry Potter and the Rewind Reviews, Legend of Korra.
Yeah, something's gone wrong with my document, and it's not got that in it, which is frustrating.
Yeah, but I don't think... But Dan, you going, we'll get to Legend of Korra in whatever month, 2023. I don't think anyone's going to go, oh, I'll set an alarm. I wouldn't let it worry you.
That's fair. No, so
say,
it looks,
obviously,
it looks like we're going to get to it in January.
What, 2023? I suppose that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, January 2023. So yeah.
Yeah, because we're fairly early. Yeah, because we're still fairly early on in 2022, aren't we? Yeah. We are aware, obviously,
that's essentially a 6-month gap, which is a lot, but yeah.
We are aware that the franchise is actually called Wizarding World, but Harry Potter and the Rewind Reviews is too cool a title not to do. So I'm kind of excited. I mean,
I tell you what, it's going to be a bumpy ride, isn't it? There's going to be a lot to go through. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be super fun, and it does feel like the natural thing to do since we've referenced Harry Potter so many times.
Yes.
We can play a drinking game, dear listener, where every time one of us says, in the book, you'll be dead. But that'll be fun.
I don't know whether to, because I don't know. I haven't read the books in a long time. I don't think you should read the books before seeing the films, because I think you're already going to be, as you've set up, you're already coming from that place.
Yes.
I don't know whether I'm tempted to try and get the books read before the films as well, or whether to leave that as it is. Because actually, I've exposed myself to the films more recently than I have the books. So yeah, I need to mull on that. But I think you definitely know the books well enough to not need to do that.
Oh yeah. I've read the books every couple of years for a long time. I'm very familiar.
And I don't know whether me not doing that will keep us on a track of avoiding doing that too much. But before then, we've got a whole series of Rewind Reviews to do, which of course will kick off with Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
I'm so excited about that.
So who knows what choices? I mean, I might choose the first Harry Potter movie just to really fuck us up.
Don't do that.
I'm not going to do that, obviously. But there is a trilogy space open, obviously, at the end of this series.
Yeah, we haven't done
so.
it. So we haven't. Yeah, we haven't done. We've not. So usually we go into a season of Rewind reviews, kind of knowing what trilogy we're gonna tackle, but we've not done that this year. So I don't know.
No. Don't know. Let me just Google. But yeah, how are you feeling about the Harry Potter one?
I'm super excited. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I think it's going to be. We're going to hate ourselves. Like, we clearly hate ourselves by choosing to do this. It's good. I think the result, the part. If we want to talk about like a nitpickable film, like something, because we always talk about rewind reviews. Like, some of the best rewind reviews are the ones where it's like the movie's like does not work, and we kind of know that. Perfect example. Like, yeah, there's problems. These Harry Potter films got some problems. So I'm really looking forward to, because I've threatened for years to like, go through them, make notes, and like do like actual like video essay type things on them. I've referenced that so long, and I've never found the time to do it. So I need to pull the trigger on something where I can actually talk, because I've spent most of my adult life feeling like a lunatic because so many people feel so strongly about these movies, and I haven't liked them pretty much ever. I thought parts of Chamber of Secrets worked okay. And at the time, I didn't hate Goblet of Fire, although that one's really broken. And I think I defended some elements of the first half of Deathly Hallows to the part one, but I've never been a big fan of these films, and I've sat through them for years as a fan of the books. And yeah, I just can't wait to actually dive into why I don't. Because I've always wanted to atone for that sort of. So for me, it's gonna be like finally getting it off my chest, because I've lived in a world where everyone acts like these films are the second coming, and I cannot stand them. Like, casual audiences love these movies, and I cannot figure out why. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because my last rewatch, I liked them more because I think I had a bit of distance from the books, and so I judged them more as films. And some of them Prisoner of Azkaban, judged as a film on its own, is much better than it judged as an adaptation of the book. Because as an adaptation of the book, it sucks, and I could never understand why people loved that film and said it was the best film. And then I rewatched it as a film and went, oh, okay, I do kind of get this. Whereas Goblet of Fire, I think as a film is a fucking mess. Like, Goblet of Fire, and there was a time when I'd have said Goblet of Fire was my favourite, because I just hadn't sort of reviewed them objectively in my mind. So I think it's going to be a fascinating rewatch. There's no obvious link that I can see. Obviously, there's a new Jurassic World film, but that's not a trilogy. That's 5 films. So instead, we're going to pluck a trilogy out of the air, which could indeed be more fun. So yeah, who knows what the trilogy will be? Who knows what the choices will be? But that can be, you can find out what we thought of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and what the next choice, what my first choice is right now, if you want, on the old Patreon.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. I forgot. Yeah, so if you go to the Patreon, you get these podcasts a week early. If you're listening to this, then no, actually that's not true. Sorry, that won't be true this time, because I think we're gonna have a week gap that's been created by us doubling up these finales.
Oh, you're gonna go. I didn't know if you were gonna go gap episode, but are you gonna go episode gap?
We're going to go episode, gap, episode. Just one gap, because that lines up the Christmas episodes better.
Okay, fine. Cool.
It's a bit confusing. Sorry.
That's fine. As long as we're still like 10 weeks ahead from the point of recording, that's fine.
Yeah, we will be. So that means that basically it lines up the Christmas ones better, because I wanted you to be able to sort of... Oh, there you go. So, there you go. 31st of January will be the return to Korra. Cool. But it means the Christmas episodes line up a little neater for...
cool. Fine.
For, what's it called? Santa Claus. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Either way, keep an eye out.
No, that doesn't sound right, because then is there a month gap before Korra starts?
No, it's the Christmas episodes fall in the middle of that season of Rewind Reviews.
Ah, right. The Christmas, right. Cool, fine.
Yeah, because that series of Rewind Reviews won't start until like November.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll figure it out. I'm not 100% sure exactly. I've been trying to do the math while we've been talking these last few minutes, so I can give exact dates, and I need to look at it closer. I can't do it while.
Yeah, like I say, sometime most likely early 2023, we are back with Legend of Korra.
Oh, that I think is pretty much fixed. It's January 2023. Is cool. Korra for sure. Cool. That won't be changing. It might move a week back from that 31st date that I just gave, but it's depending on what I do with something else. But Korra's back in January. In the meantime, it's going to be Rewind reviews with a Harry Potter sort of sub-series, which will be available on the Rewind Reviews feed, but will also be available to patrons through our Patreon. And all of those will be available a week ahead of their release on major audio platforms via the Patreon. So if you go give us as little as $1 a month, you can get access to that.
Yeah, and check out the next series of Rewind Reviews starting next week.
Yeah, or the week after, depending on again what I do. But you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So the next, you know what I mean.
Yeah, Roger Rabbit coming very soon, within a week or two of this. And then we'll carry on through. Yeah, I feel like
awesome.
that whole section that we just talked about, that was very marred by me trying to do the math while I was talking. So, sorry.
It's all good. You know what I like to say, Dan? Something, episode title.
I'm laughing now at just how much you've been tickled by that, because that was such a...
Because the problem is it's too, like... what upsets me is I'm enjoying it so much I'd love it to become a thing, but I can't, like, re-explain it on another podcast, and this doesn't go out for weeks, so I think I'm getting my fix of it now, because I know I can't make it a thing.
Yeah, perfect. All right, well, thanks everyone for listening. We love you all. It's been a real joy. I've really enjoyed rewatching Avatar with a more critical eye, and sort of, while there have been definitely several points when I've sort of identified that it's not been perfect, it's still pretty incredible that this show exists, and even more so when you think about the era in which it existed within. So I'm really, really pleased with how the show held up under sort of slightly more scrutiny than I usually apply to it. And I've been really, really pleased with how this podcast has been. It's been so much fun. So I want to take a moment to thank Chris for coming along on the ride. He always jokes forcibly, but, I do give him a choice. He doesn't have to do these podcasts. He could have a life if he wanted it. I just don't, he just chooses to spend it doing this because he's an idiot. But so do I, so I can't criticise.
I just wouldn't want to upset you, Dan. I just wouldn't want to. I don't even want to think about how that conversation might go.
What are you saying? No, thank you.
me being like, nah, I'm done. I don't even it's not worth the. You know what I mean? Who goes out their way to?
That makes this sound like a really dodgy, really forced relationship. That's upsetting. I don't like that, even as a joke.
No. To clarify, I've never wanted to, but if I did want to, I don't think I'd bother then. But the thing to hold on to,
he's happy in the relationship as it stands, but he's scared about one day not feeling that way and not knowing how to broach that topic.
Oh dear.
Dear.
Not at all.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. It's genuinely been a pleasure.
I just wanted to.
And again, thank you to Chris for coming along on this journey with me, because let's be honest, I ramble a lot because I'm ineloquent. But the reason people are coming to this podcast, despite the fact I end up doing I'm sure more than 50% of the talking because I'm a blabbermouth, people are coming here to get the experience of someone new to the show discovering it. It's the same with Steven University. There's a reason you get an applause at the start of all these episodes. Is you are the hook for everything like this, and I really do appreciate you bringing your thought to it.
No, I think we are two equal pieces of the puzzle. At least we forget, Dan. You do all the work. Thank you for the notes, for the trivia, for triving it up, for everything you do. And I was just going to say thank you to kind of both the new listeners that have never heard anything, that have kind of stuck around for Analysing Avatar because they're a fan of Avatar. And thank you to the people that have listened to everything else, that have also then completed the set and listened to this as well. Really, really appreciate new and old listeners and everyone commenting, interacting, joining the Discord, joining Patreon, etc. It's not about me, it's not about Dan, it's about you guys. You guys are awesome. So thank you very much.
Bloody heroes, a lot of them.
Yeah, man.
Bloody heroes. All right, well, that is everything. So thank you guys so much for joining us on this one. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in January, unless you join us for Rewind Reviews, when we sit down and take a look at Legend of Korra.
I love the notion that, like, we've sort of done this sort of thank you to new listeners, thank you for those that have watched everything, but we are going to assume that's not going to happen for Rewind Reviews. And we'll assume that we'll see most of you.
I don't think that's an assumption. We've both seen the figures. It's not likely. Maybe they'll join us for the Harry Potter one. Maybe they'll join us for the Harry Potter one.
Maybe. I think a lot of them will feel they've had the Harry Potter one over the course of the 3 seasons of this.
But yeah,
no, we do
good times. But yeah, thanks everyone again.
We love you. I have no intentions of leaving my podcast relationship with Dan. I want to make that very clear. But most of all, we love you.
We do. So thanks again, and bye. I guess.
Bye.
Bye. Can't not end with a bye. I don't know why. In that exact tone every week. Bye.
Oh, Zuki Poos.
Oh, Zuki Poos. Fire Dude and Uncle Fire Dude.
And of course, most of all,
yeah,
something episode title.